The opportunity to break through had suddenly appeared. They could finally take the step that they had never been able to take before. Boom! Giant Chaos God's massive body was wrapped in the supreme laws and was in the midst of a rapid transformation. Supreme power began to emerge from his body. It was the same for the monster ancestor, Ancient God Void / and Ancient God Void Destruction. At this moment, Ju's gaze was cold as he snorted. His other hand suddenly struck toward the four experts. The moment he attacked, the few ancient chaos gods who had not hidden themselves exploded, dying on the spot, creating bloody marks. Roar! In the face of such a terrifying attack, Giant Chaos God roared, and his body became even larger. A giant hammer appeared in front of him. Supreme power wrapped itself around the hammer as it struck out. You dare to stop me? The enmity of blocking my breakthrough must be avenged. Boom! The hammer shattered. The monster ancestor turned into a humongous monster, and behind him were countless illusory images of monsters, as he blocked this attack. Ancient God Void / and Ancient God Void Destruction also used their own techniques to block this attack. We will definitely take revenge. At this moment, they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality. There was no need to hide it. Either they would successfully break through, or they would die. At this moment, the entire chaos began to shake. Countless experts were shocked at this moment. What? It turned out that the path to the Chaos Supreme Realm had already been cut off by someone. HMPH. Ju snorted coldly. How could he allow his enemies to break through? He attacked again, trying to interrupt their breakthroughs. At the same time, he used the supreme law of extinction in an attempt to block the path to the breakthrough once again. Chuzan sighed. Since he had already made a move in secret, if he did not do something now, it would be difficult for these four to break through successfully. The power of the supreme laws emerged again, and his supreme power swept out and blocked Ju's supreme law of extinction. PFF'd. Giant Chaos God vomited blood as his powerful physical body cracked. However, he still managed to block the second attack. He was only a little bit away from completing the transformation process. Ancient God Void Destruction's body exploded, but he instantly recovered. His face was pale, but he still persevered. One treasure after another appeared. Ancient God Void / and the monster ancestor were the same, both heavily injured. However, they still managed to block the second attack. Seniors of the chaos, are you just going to watch? The monster ancestor roared. If we fail, you will never be able to break through. An old voice suddenly emerged from the chaos. How can you block the path to the Chaos Supreme Realm? A wave of power was transmitted over. After the first one made his move, the other powerful existences followed suit. Their power spread out. It was all to help the four experts withstand the attacks and complete the final breakthrough. Helping others was also helping oneself. Ju temporarily withdrew his hand from the heavenly Tao. His eyes were extremely cold. Today, the chaos and order shall be rebuilt. At the same time, he raised his head to look at the supreme primal chaos space and said, you guys are still watching. Make your move. In the supreme primal chaos space, an imposing figure appeared and looked down. However, he did not make a move. After a long while, an ancient existence said, the heavenly Tao is unusual. Do we need to make a move? Ju should be able to handle it. They were all silent and continued to watch. Ju was powerful and could control the power of the supreme laws. How could he not deal with it? How could it be so easy to break through? Ju did not receive any response, but he did not care. He raised his hand again. His supreme power appeared, spreading throughout the entire chaos. At this moment, many experts seemed to see a broken future. It was as if everything was about to be cut off. Chuzan raised an eyebrow as Ju withdrew his hand from the heavenly Tao. The four experts were about to fail their breakthrough. They would not be able to resist Ju's supreme law of extinction. The time they had bought was still not enough. If Chuzan took a step further, he would definitely be noticed. However, if he did not interfere, the moment Giant Chaos God and the other three failed, Ju would definitely use an even more heavy-handed method to invade the heavenly Tao. At that time, he would be forced to expose himself. He had to stop them a little more and buy more time. As long as one of the four experts succeeded in breaking through, they would be able to buy more time. That being said, the other Chaos Supreme Realm experts did not interfere, which was unexpected. As Ju made his move, the power that was helping the four experts crumbled instantly. The experts who had made their move were also severely injured by the backlash. As Giant Chaos God and the other three, they had yet to complete their breakthrough even after giving it their all. It looked like their breakthrough was about to be interrupted, cutting off their path forward. At this moment, time power suddenly emerged, as a jade-white dragon made his appearance. The time power was like a wave, rippling as the giant dragon circled the chaos. The four of them were surrounded by the waves of time power, which kept resisting Ju's power of extinction. Huang Long's weak voice entered the four experts' ears. Hurry up and break through. I can't hold on for long. He was helpless and could only use the time power with Chu Zan's help to resist for a while. After all, he was not a Chaos Supreme Realm expert. Even though he could use the time power augmented by the Supreme Laws for a short time due to his special abilities, he was not strong enough and could only resist Ju's power temporarily. Moreover, after the event, he would become weakened and would have to enter a period of dormancy to recover. Impudent, Ju was furious. Boom. As the huge hand struck, cracks appeared on Huang Long's body. Even with time power, he could not offset the attack. He was still too weak. However, he still managed to stall Ju. Boom. At this moment, when the waves of time power crumbled and Huang Long returned to the heavenly Tao, Giant Chaos God roared and instantly completed his transformation. He did not need to stabilize his breakthrough. His body was like a mountain and his eyes were blood red. His huge fist was aimed at Ju. Boom. Even though he was not as powerful as Ju, he could still hold him off for a while. Should we make a move? In the Supreme Primal Chaos space, a Chaos Supreme Realm expert spoke in a deep voice. There was silence. No one answered. Ju was furious. Those people were actually ignoring him. He knew that he would become the enemy of these new Chaos Supreme Realm experts, as he had been the one to block the path. They were deliberately allowing this to happen to restrain him. After Giant Chaos God successfully broke through, the Demon Ancestor and the other two also completed their breakthroughs one after another. The moment the three of them broke through, a giant hand descended. A Chaos Supreme Realm expert had made his move. At the same time, another giant hand reached out toward the heavenly Tao. Stop! Ancient God Void Slash used all his strength to block the massive hand. Since he had already broken through, he naturally had to repay the senior who had helped him. They had to help him buy time. It was also at this moment, the 100-year milestone arrived. You remained in seclusion for 100 years and set a new record, nurturing disciples with monstrous levels of talent. You ended the Daoyuan calamity in advance, ended the Great Tao calamity before it began, started the Abyssal calamity, created the Heavenly Tao, and devoured the Great Tao of the 9 zones. You formed the Divine World, and created the 3 realms, as well as the Buddhist world and the Monster world. You altered the course of the chaos, and caused it to enter a new era. You remained hidden and secretly helped the 4 experts break through to the Chaos Supreme Realm. You have been rewarded with the Creation Chaos Scripture and Supreme Invincibility. 100 years had passed, and the system issued a series of notifications. Chu Zan could not help but sigh. He had actually done so many things from the comfort of his courtyard. The entire chaos changed because of him. Excited, he checked his reward. The Creation Chaos Scripture of Creation was a cultivation method to transcend the chaos, which perfectly matched his 3,000 chaos bodies of creation. His wish had finally come true. He had obtained the cultivation method to transcend the chaos. The other reward was Supreme Invincibility. He was invincible. He was invincible within the chaos. Chu Zan did not choose to receive the Creation Chaos Scripture immediately. After all, it would take some time to comprehend the cultivation method. Instead, he chose to receive the Supreme Invincibility reward. In an instant, the 3,000 masses of chaotic energy of creation in his body underwent a transformation. The embryonic Supreme Laws were the same. His strength had undergone a huge transformation. However, he was still very far away from transcending the chaos. Even so, within the Chaos Supreme Realm, he was already invincible. The Supreme Invincibility reward from the system not only increased his strength, but it also gave him the ability to ignore the restraints of the supreme powers and laws of others. They would not be able to cause him any harm, and he now had the ability to kill them. Chaos Supreme Realm experts were basically immortal. If he wanted to kill a Chaos Supreme Realm expert, he would have to destroy their corresponding supreme law and cause it to change. Even a Chaos Supreme Realm expert could not change the supreme laws of the chaos. This also meant that, under normal circumstances, no matter how strong he was, he would not be able to kill a Chaos Supreme Real expert, even if the latter was weaker than he was. He could suppress and seal them, but could not kill them. This was the uniqueness of the Chaos Supreme Realm. Only those who transcended the chaos would be able to do so. However, those who had transcended the chaos would have already left the chaos, and would have no reason to interfere with the matters of the chaos. Therefore, unless the chaos was destroyed, or the supreme laws of the chaos were changed or destroyed, Chaos Supreme Realm experts were immortal. Other than these two circumstances, the only time a Chaos Supreme Realm expert would die would be when they encountered a great tribulation when attempting to transcend the chaos, like Lord of Chaos had. Chuzan had the ability to kill Chaos Supreme Realm experts, even without changing the supreme laws of the chaos. This was the benefit of the supreme invincibility that the system had given him. Chuzan was the only Chaos Supreme Realm expert who could kill other Chaos Supreme Realm experts. This singular ability was enough to make him invincible within the chaos. At this moment, another system notification rang out. You have completed the first, stay at home, stage with flying colors. The system will now enter a dormancy for an update and restart. Chuzan was startled. The system was undergoing an update process and restarting. This was something he had not expected. At that moment, the system panel displayed updating. Closing square bracket. Fortunately, he could still collect his previous reward despite this. Chuzan let out a sigh of relief. Then, he was overjoyed. The system was being updated, and he was already invincible within the chaos, so he could go out. After 100 years, he could finally go out. Boom. At this moment that ancient god Void Slash was suppressed by a massive hand, and smashed into the heavenly Tao. In that instant, the entire heavenly Tao and divine world was shaking. Were it not for the fact that ancient god Void Slash was doing his best to resist the attacks and constantly dissipate their power, the attacks would have already landed on the heavenly Tao and divine world. That would have been a disaster. In the distance, giant chaos god spat out mouthfuls of blood. His massive and powerful body shattered and reformed again and again. He had just broken through to the Chaos Supreme Realm, after all, so he was no match for Ju. Even if Ju could not kill him, he could still suppress and seal him. The monster ancestor and ancient god Void Destruction were doing their utmost to resist the suppression of another giant hand. Ancient god Void Slash was standing in front of the heavenly Tao, but he was already finding it very difficult to defend. Were it not for the fact that the Chaos Supreme Realm expert did not want to completely destroy the heavenly Tao and divine world, he would not have been able to hold on for this long. Ju's expression was cold. The two of them waited for these four experts to break through before making a move. He could take advantage of the fact that these four had yet to become strong and had just broken through to suppress and seal them. However, it also meant that he had more potential enemies. He had to be careful. In the event of any major changes in the chaos, the suppressed experts would break out of the seal and be a potential source of danger to him. This was probably the result that the others wanted to see. These four could distract him and even hold him back when major changes occurred in the chaos. He suppressed giant chaos god with one hand and then suddenly turned around and threw a punch at ancient god Void Slash. So what if you broke through? Today, I'll suppress all of you. Ancient god Void Slash was smashed into the heavenly Tao. At this moment, all of the living beings in the divine world were in a panic. The experts' avatars all paled. In the courtyard, the expressions of Heiyu and the others also changed. HMPH. Chuzan's cold snort entered the ears of everyone in the battle. The heavenly Tao is the center of the chaos, bearing the fate of the chaos. The direction and future of chaos are not something you can be presumptuous about. After Chuzan spoke, Ju paused. Immediately after, a few illusory figures descended from the supreme primal chaos space. They all looked at the heavenly Tao in shock. Another Chaos Supreme expert. How was that possible? They were well aware of how many Chaos Supreme Realm experts there were in the chaos. If someone had broken through to the Chaos Supreme Realm, how could they not know? They were all looking toward the heavenly Tao with puzzled looks. Controlling the chaos. How dare you? Where did you come from? You want to overturn the order of my chaos. Ju shouted coldly. Immediately after, a giant hand pressed down on the heavenly Tao. This time, he did not hold back, and exerted the full power of his supreme power of extinction, seemingly wanting to cut off the heavenly Tao from the divine world. You must die for blocking the path to the Chaos Supreme Realm for all living beings of chaos and weakening the growth of the chaos. A mysterious force appeared and blocked Ju's hand. Chuzan took a step forward, and activated his divine might ancient form. A long river paved with stars spread out from the world into the chaos. The azure dragon, white tiger, black tortoise, and vermilion bird, the four divine beasts, protected the four spirits' star chariot and displayed their powerful might. The might of the four divine beasts shook the chaos. Chuzan sat in the chariot, bathed in the majestic aura of his divine might ancient form. Heiyu and the others were dumbfounded. This was their master. Chuzan was also super excited. He could finally go out and show off. The 4 Spirit Stars chariot would finally be put to good use. The 4 divine beasts protected each corner of the chariot, and each one of them had transcended the world creator realm. He had no idea how the system had managed to get these 4 to become the guardians of the chariot, but it did not matter. After being momentarily stunned, Su Shan'er regained her senses and excitedly stepped onto the star path and boarded the chariot. She stood beside Chuzan obediently. After all, she was his maidservant, so she was duty-bound to follow her master on his trips. In the next moment, Chuyun also rushed into the chariot. Chuzan's disciples all quickly stepped on the star path behind the chariot. They were extremely excited. Today, I will kill a Chaos Supreme Realm expert and start a new era in the chaos, Chuzan said indifferently. It was also good for his disciples to see the world. At the same time, he would tell the experts in the chaos that these were his disciples to intimidate those experts and prevent his disciples from being bullied when they ventured out into the chaos. Outside the divine world, the 4 experts were covered in blood, and their auras were in disarray as they gathered together. They were extremely excited. It seemed that they had been successful in buying time for the senior. That senior was about to make a move. Ju's expression turned grave. The rest of the Chaos Supreme Realm experts also descended. However, they were all quite far away. Especially 2 of them, who were the more ancient ones. Those 2 looked at the heavenly Tao, and no one knew what they were thinking. The star path spread into the chaos, dazzling those who saw it, and the roars of the 4 divine beasts rang out. Which Chaos Supreme Realm expert had this kind of prestige and aura? Ju looked at the others. An unknown Chaos Supreme Realm expert, and you all want to indulge him? An old voice rang out. Uncontrollable variables can be suppressed. Don't worry, we will not sit by and watch. Ju snorted coldly in his heart. These guys were simply letting him test the other party's strength. Ju knew that these people were all afraid of his growth and potential, as well as of his supreme law of extinction. They were afraid that once he reached a certain level, he would be able to block them from improving further. However, what did it matter if he had one more powerful enemy? Ju was confident that he would eventually become the #1 Chaos Supreme Realm expert. A chariot charged up from the divine world, traversing a star path that seemed to materialize under its wheels. On the chariot sat a majestic existence that could not be looked at directly. Even the Chaos Supreme Realm experts could sense the majesty and might of that mysterious Chaos Supreme Realm expert. Although his face could not be seen clearly, he looked like a god that had descended from the heavens. At this moment, they were all shocked, including the 4 experts who had just broken through to the Chaos Supreme Realm. Was this that mysterious senior? He was too majestic and imposing. Compared to the other Chaos Supreme Realm experts, the difference was like night and day. Furthermore, were those the 4 divine beasts? It was no wonder the 4 divine beasts had disappeared. It turned out that they had submitted to such a terrifying existence. Then, they looked at the people on the star path. Were those not the most outstanding cultivators on the heavenly Tao arena earlier? So this senior was the one who trained them. No wonder they were so freakish and managed to defeat their avatars. When Chuzan appeared, countless experts who were paying attention to the heavenly Tao were shocked. The 3 ancestors could not help but also emerge from their hiding places in shock, as did many other ancient chaos gods. What kind of terrifying existence was this? This person was so majestic that they could not even look at him directly. Chuzan was very happy. The star path spread toward the chaos, and as the chariot traversed the star path, the divine might ancient form exuded supreme majesty. He was looking down upon the other Chaos Supreme experts from above. Excluding the 4 experts who had just broken through, there were a total of 7 Chaos Supreme experts, which was not a large number. Chuzan guessed that it had something to do with the path to the Chaos Supreme Realm being blocked. He looked at the chaos. This was Chuzan's first time observing chaos from outside the heavenly Tao. It was as if he could see the entire expanse of the chaos in his field of vision. However, it was only an illusion. Even with his strength as a Chaos Supreme Realm, he could not see the edges of the chaos from here. His gaze looked into the distance. There was a terrifying chaos abyss with old laws of the chaos entwined around it. Furthermore, there seemed to be something hidden beneath the abyss. He saw 2 other smaller abysses, which were not surrounded by the power of the old laws. Rather, there was a suppressive power that clearly contained the supreme law of extinction. There were actually 2 Chaos Supreme experts who were suppressed there. As for the person who suppressed them, it was obviously Ju. This person was really not a good person. He was also extremely powerful due to the overbearing power of his supreme law of extinction. Ju's eyes flashed with cold light as he said, "In the chaos, there is no Chaos Supreme Realm expert like you. Where did you come from? You have changed the great Tao of the 9 zones and disrupted the order of the chaos. You must provide an explanation for your actions." Chu Zan looked down at him. "You blocked the path of all living beings to the Chaos Supreme Realm and weakened the growth of chaos. What punishment do you deserve? Today, I will remove you on behalf of all of the living beings in the chaos." Ju's aura burst forth. The chaos trembled, and layers of space shattered. In an instant, the supreme primal chaos space was revealed. The supreme laws wrapped around the surroundings, protecting the supreme primal chaos space. The experts of the chaos all fled and left this place. It was a battle between Chaos Supreme Realm experts. Even a small shockwave was enough to turn them into ashes. I have suppressed more than 1 Chaos Supreme Realm expert ever since I broke through to the Chaos Supreme Realm. I'm afraid another one will be added to that number today. Chu Zan's appearance was shocking, but Ju felt that it was just a flashy show of power and that there was no reason to be afraid. Giant Chaos God and the others also released their auras and locked onto Ju. This was their hated enemy. You have just broken through and have not stabilized your cultivation yet. Don't get involved, an ancient voice rang out. An aura suppressed the 4 experts. Chu Zan raised an eyebrow, but he was not in a hurry to attack. He looked at the other 6 Chaos Supreme Realm experts. What are your thoughts? He was considering whether he should kill all 6 of them if they attacked. After that, he would release the 2 that had been suppressed. Then, all of the Supreme Realm experts in the chaos would be indebted to him and would listen to his instructions. In a sense, he would have unified the chaos. You have to give us an explanation. Why did the Heavenly Tao come about? What are your intentions? A Chaos Supreme Realm said. Explanation, are you even worthy? Chu Zan laughed in disdain. He stood up and alighted the chariot onto the star path. His unparalleled majestic figure almost made him seem like the master of this chaos. At a certain moment, the heart of that Chaos Supreme Realm expert trembled slightly. His expression changed slightly. The words he was about to say were immediately swallowed back. The aura on his body was also slightly restrained. Without saying a word, he backed away a little. His movements were concealed. The rest of the Chaos Supreme Realm experts' attention was focused on Chu Zan, so they did not notice this. Chu Zan raised an eyebrow. This was getting interesting. Was that an ancient Chaos Supreme Realm expert? He actually noticed that something was wrong and immediately backed out to avoid being caught up in the forthcoming. This person's sense of danger must be extraordinary. It was likely that he had relied on this ability to avoid danger time and time again before finally ascending to the Chaos Supreme Realm. I won't kill this one. He decided that it would be boring if all of the Chaos Supreme Realm experts in the entire chaos were his people. There always had to be some competition. As for the other 5, it would depend on whether they could figure out the situation in time. That being said, Ju had to be killed. Otherwise, once Chu Zan transcended the chaos, this person would definitely repeat his actions again and block the path to the Chaos Supreme Realm, which would threaten the growth of the Heavenly Tao. Arrogant, Ju said angrily. The other 5 Chaos Supreme Realm experts were also furious. They were not worthy. They were all Chaos Supreme experts and the mightiest beings in the chaos, yet this person had judged them to be unworthy. How could they bear to be looked down upon like this? In an instant, 5 auras surged and locked onto Chu Zan. It looked like they would attack at any moment. Giant Chaos God and the other 3 immediately roared and exploded with their own auras after being released from the aura from that ancient Chaos Supreme Realm expert that had backed off. Each of them locked onto one person. It should not be a problem for them to buy some time. Then, the remaining ancient Chaos Supreme Realm expert suddenly retracted his aura and turned to suppress the 4 experts. Juniors, don't interfere. At the same time, he retreated a little. Chu Zan raised an eyebrow. This old man was cunning as well. It was no wonder they had lived such long lives. Chu Zan could tell that these 2 old men had long lost their drive. Back then, when they broke through to the Chaos Supreme Realm, it was probably because of some opportunities and fortunes. Of the 7 Chaos Supreme Realm experts, Ju had the most potential and ambition. The 2 old men seemed to be slightly stronger, but that was the end of it. Ju would definitely catch up eventually. The other 4 were not as ambitious as Ju, but they at least still had the drive to push forward. Arrogant, Chu Zan chuckled. I've always kept a low profile and have never been arrogant. He looked at Ju and said, I'll give you a chance to live. Bow your head and become my charioteer. You dare to insult me? Ju was furious. Die. Layers of chaotic space crumbled, and the star path trembled, slowly collapsing inch by inch. The supreme laws appeared, unceasingly maintaining the supreme primal chaos space. At this moment, the heavenly Tao was affected by the surging aura and also shuddered. Countless experts were shocked. Was this the power of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert? Even the 4 experts felt pressured. The difference was too great. They had just broken through to Chaos Supreme Realm, and had yet to master the use of supreme power. It was true that it was almost impossible to kill them now that they were Chaos Supreme Realm experts. However, Ju could definitely suppress them. Without Senior's help, even if they had broken through, they would still be suppressed in the end. Ju attacked in anger, displaying his terrifying power. It was as if the chaos was about to be reduced to nothingness. The expressions of the experts who were watching all changed greatly. They felt as if their divine souls were about to be torn apart. As for Su Shaner, Chu Yun, and Chu Zan's disciples, they were shielded from Ju's terrifying aura. However, they could see its effects, as spatial cracks appeared everywhere, and even the chaos itself seemed to tremble. It was too terrifying. Was this how powerful Chaos Supreme Realm experts were? However, when they saw Chu Zan's unfathomable figure standing on the star path, unfazed, they remembered that despite what was going on, they were safe. They heaved a collective sigh of relief. HMPH. Chu Zan snorted. Then, a mysterious power descended upon the chaos, completely shattering Ju's aura, as it was as fragile as paper. Every living being in the chaos heard that snort, and could sense that mysterious power. At this moment, they all felt like ants, and could only marvel at Chu Zan's power. Chu Zan's eyes shone with divine light, as he took a step forward. He looked like a god looking down upon mere mortals. Since you're seeking your own death, I'll fulfill your wish. Chu Zan's majestic voice resounded. He raised a hand and pressed it down upon Ju. Ju's expression changed. The other party was unexpectedly powerful. Attack. He turned around and looked at the other 6 Chaos Supreme Realm experts. He roused his supreme power to its limits and went all out, unleashing a tremendous attack toward Chu Zan's descending palm. The 2 ancient Chaos Supreme Realm experts retreated even further away silently. The other 4 were shocked, hesitating about whether they should attack. Boom! Chu Zan's terrifying palm was surrounded by the supreme laws. His supreme power was beyond imagination. Ju's supreme power paled in comparison. Pi plus or minus d plus or minus AA, I 1/2 a nu a cubed. Boom! Ju's supreme power crumbled inch by inch. He roared, but he could not escape his fate. As the palm pressed down, the expressions of the 4 Chaos Supreme Realm experts who were hesitating changed again. Ju could not even withstand a single blow and was suppressed just like that. How could this mysterious Chaos Supreme Realm expert be so powerful? Could it be that he existed before the chaos, and was an extremely ancient existence? Then, something terrifying happened. The 9 supreme laws appeared, and a portion of one of the laws separated itself from the group. Thena. It shattered. At this moment, Ju shrieked in pain and his body turned into nothingness. His supreme law of extinction also began to crack apart at this moment, fusing into the supreme primal chaos space. Boom! The chaos began to shake. Everyone could vaguely hear a sorrowful cry that resounded throughout the chaos. The sorrowful cry grew louder and louder. All of the living beings in the chaos could hear it, and could feel the slight trembling of the chaos. The sorrowful cry and a cold wind gently swept through the entire chaos. Confusion filled the minds of the living beings of the chaos. What was going on? What was that sorrowful cry and cold wind? Those who had transcended the world creator realm were shocked, as an indescribable feeling filled their hearts. They realized that something terrible had happened in the chaos. The experts watching what was going on around the heavenly Tao all tensed up and held their breaths, not daring to make a single sound. Their hearts were trembling. Their divine souls were trembling. It was too terrifying. A Chaos Supreme Realm expert had fallen. It was rumored that a Chaos Supreme Realm expert, who had never been defeated, had fallen today. Were Chaos Supreme Realm experts not supposed to be immortal? Furthermore, he was killed by a terrifying existence with a single palm strike. The 4 experts were also drenched in cold sweat. Ju's death had been a huge blow to them. They realized that even as Chaos Supreme Realm, they could still die. However, they were also relieved. Their breakthrough was all thanks to this senior, so they could be considered his followers. From now on, they had an incomparably powerful backer. The other 6 Chaos Supreme Realm experts were terrified. This was the first time they had felt fear ever since they broke through to the Chaos Supreme Realm. A Chaos Supreme Realm expert had actually fallen. Furthermore, Ju was the one of the strongest among them, and would have eventually surpassed all of them. However, he had been killed in a single blow. How could a Chaos Supreme Realm expert die? They were connected to the Supreme Laws. The Supreme Laws of the Chaos only appeared for a moment before a portion of its laws broke. However, it did not take long for it to restore itself after Ju died. Honestly, if Ju had been killed after a bitter and brutal battle, they would not have been so frightened. They would definitely have rushed forward immediately and suppressed and sealed this fellow who had the ability to kill Chaos Supreme Realm experts. Furthermore, they would guard the seal at all times to prevent any accidents. They did not dare to move. What had happened to Ju could befall them in an instant as well. It had happened so quickly that they did not even have time to react or make a move. In a sense, this was a blessing. Otherwise, they would have offended this mysterious expert. That being said, although they had not attacked, they were also involved in the schemes against the Heavenly Tao. The more they thought about it, the more frightened they became. They were all racking their brains on how they could escape this calamity. Su Shaner and the others looked at Chu Zan with admiration. Such a terrifying expert had been killed with a single attack. As expected, Master is invincible, Ding Yu said in shock. The sorrowful cry and cold wind lasted for half an hour before disappearing. The chaos then returned to its peaceful state. However, the experts did not share that same peace, and were unable to calm down. Many ancient chaos gods were filled with indescribable emotions. They remembered that there had once been a similar sorrowful cry and cold wind in the past. Furthermore, it was even louder and lasted longer than this time. Back then, they did not know what this phenomenon had meant. Pi plus or minus d plus or minus aa, I 1/2 a nu a cubed. However, today, they had personally witnessed the fall of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert, and understood what that phenomenon back then meant. Furthermore, the severity of the phenomenon back then could only mean that the Chaos Supreme Realm expert who had fallen back then was much more powerful than Ju. How did someone like that die? Could it be that he was also killed by this terrifying existence? Chu Zan looked at the other 6. The 2 old men had already retreated further away, clearly expressing their stance to not participate in this matter. The corners of his mouth twitched. These 2 really knew how to judge the situation. When they saw Chu Zan's gaze, the 2 old men immediately became nervous. My lord, I have nothing to do with Ju. I tried to persuade him, but he was too strong. I couldn't do anything. My lord killed Ju and maintained the order of the chaos. I am in full support of your actions. One of them quickly expressed his stances, going so far as to call him Lord. They were clearly willing to become his pawns and subordinates. My lord, I've never been on good terms with Ju, and have always been critical of his actions. Thankfully, you have upheld justice for the living beings of the chaos today by killing him. My lord is truly righteous. The other old man quickly followed suit. The other 4 Chaos Supreme Realm experts looked at the 2 old men in disbelief. Before this, the 2 of them had always maintained an air of superiority as seniors, and they had not dared to offend these 2 ancient Chaos Supreme Realm experts. Even Giant Chaos God and the other 3 were stunned by their words. How shameless and thick-skinned. Chu Zan's eyes passed over the 2 old men. The 2 old men heaved a sigh of relief. Their lives were spared. Dignity could be lost, but not one's life. Chu Zan looked at the remaining 4 Chaos Supreme Realm experts, who trembled nervously. However, they could not bring themselves to be as shameless as the old men. After a long while, one of them said, "This matter is our fault. How does Senior wish to punish us? Where did you go wrong?" Chu Zan's voice was emotionless. "We shouldn't have interfered with the Heavenly Tao," the Chaos Supreme Realm expert replied nervously. Resist. It was useless even if he risked his life. As for groveling like those old men, he could not do it either. After all, he still wanted to protect his dignity. What else? There was more. The 4 Chaos Supreme Realm experts looked at each other. Other than interfering with the Heavenly Tao and coveting it, what else had they done wrong? After a long while, another Chaos Supreme Realm said, "We shouldn't have allowed Ju to mess with the order of the chaos." Chu Zan did not comment. He looked at the 4 of them and remained silent for a long time. The 4 Chaos Supreme Realm experts felt as if a huge rock was weighing down on their hearts. The pressure was mounting with every passing moment. They wondered how this terrifying existence would deal with them, and felt despair. They were Chaos Supreme Realm experts, yet were still unable to control their own fates, like ants. Since you know that you've done wrong, how should you be punished? Finally, Chuzan spoke. How should they be punished? The four of them looked at each other. At that moment, they did not know how to answer Chuzan. Who would be willing to die after cultivating to their level? Chuzan's gaze gradually turned sharp, seemingly indicating impatience. The hearts of the four Chaos Supreme Realm experts trembled, and they broke out in cold sweat. Suddenly, one of them had a flash of inspiration. He bowed and said, "Senior, we are the later generation of Chaos Supreme Realm experts. Those two are our seniors. Compared to them, we don't know much about the order of the chaos. Their understanding of chaos and order is far beyond our level. Since we've made a mistake, we naturally have to be punished. The four of us are lacking and don't know what kind of punishment we should receive. I think we should ask the two seniors how we should be punished." The two old men cursed inwardly. "Beastard, you actually dragged us into this." "That makes sense," Chuzan nodded. He looked at the two old men. "What do you two say?" The two old men looked at each other with heavy expressions. If they were not careful, they would be consigned to eternal damnation. One of them carefully said, "My lord, we have indeed made a mistake, which disrupted the order of the chaos. Naturally, we have to accept our punishment for this, and will do whatever you say without complaint." The old man knew what needed to be said. Chuzan was in a good mood and looked at the two old men with satisfaction. People who could read the room and adapt accordingly would definitely be very efficient in doing things on his behalf in the future. As for the other four, they were slightly lacking. Since that's the case, from today onward, the two of you will be responsible for maintaining the order of the chaos so that the geniuses can grow without being suppressed and the chaos will prosper. This was not really a punishment. Of course, he could be considered one as they would have to manage things on his behalf. "Yes, my lord." The two old men heaved a sigh of relief and quickly replied affirmatively. Chuzan's eyes turned to the other four Chaos Supreme Realm experts, who could barely restrain their nervousness. "The four of you will reflect on your mistakes in seclusion for 1,000,000,000 years." The four of them heaved a sigh of relief. This punishment could be treated as an extended closed-door cultivation session. Without waiting for them to reply, Chuzan continued, "In addition, I'll strip half of your supreme powers and inject it into the heavenly Tao as punishment." Their expressions changed. This punishment was too much. However, in the face of such a terrifying existence, what could they do? "Are you unsatisfied?" Chuzan's majestic voice resounded. "No," the four of them hurriedly replied. Resistance would probably be met with death, which was a far worse alternative. "Do you want me to do it, or will you do it yourselves?" "We won't trouble Senior regarding this matter. We'll do it ourselves." They hurriedly took action themselves and extracted half of their supreme powers and threw it into the heavenly Tao. They were worried that if Chuzan was the one to act, it would not be half of their supreme power that was stripped away, but all of it. It was wiser to do it themselves. In any case, a temporary drop in strength was far better than the alternative. By the time they were done with their 1,000,000,000-year seclusion, they would probably have already recovered their strength. "Senior, do you have any other instructions? If not, we'll return and reflect on our mistakes." "Go ahead." Chuzan waved his hand. "Yes." The four of them left in a hurry and returned to the supreme primal chaos space to cultivate in seclusion. It was too terrifying. They were finally safe, and had survived a trip into the depths of hell. "Greetings, my lord." Giant Chaos God and the other three hurriedly bowed reverentially. Were it not for this powerful senior, they would never have been able to reach the Chaos Supreme Realm. Chuzan glanced at the four and said, "Cultivate well and strengthen yourselves. If you're willing, you can spare some time to maintain the order of the heavenly Tao and its development." "Yes, my lord." The four of them hurriedly agreed. In fact, even without Chuzan's instructions, they would also protect the heavenly Tao. At this moment, the heavenly Tao changed again, and expanded to the point where it enveloped the ancient chaos world. The supreme power of the four Chaos Supreme experts had nourished and strengthened the heavenly Tao, and it once again entered a period of rapid improvement. Within the heavenly Tao, Qin was overjoyed. He had become stronger. He felt that his current strength was no weaker than the demon ancestors. Chuzan looked at the two old men. "Go do what you need to do." "Yes, my lord." The two old men heaved a sigh of relief and instantly disappeared from where they were. Giant Chaos God and the other three also left one after another and entered the supreme primal chaos space to familiarize themselves with their supreme powers. However, they stuck together so that they would be able to help each other. All four of them had avatars in the heavenly Tao, so they could detect any abnormalities there almost instantly and act accordingly. Chu Zan returned to the four spirit stars' chariot, and the star path disappeared into the chaos. His voice reverberated in the chaos. All living beings below that 100,000-mile mark can enter the heavenly Tao. The heavenly Tao was officially open to the public. Of course, it also limited the strength of those who could enter. With Qin and Funying, the two divine beings of the heavenly Tao, the order of the heavenly Tao would not be disrupted from within. The only threats were from outside the heavenly Tao. In the future, the heavenly Tao would definitely be the center of the chaos, and a holy land in the hearts of all living beings. In fact, if it continued to grow, the heavenly Tao would eventually replace the chaos. At that time, how powerful would the heavenly Tao be? Chu Zan returned to the small courtyard. He looked at Ding Yu and the other disciples. You've all finished your discipleship under me. If you feel that it's time for you to venture into the chaos, then do so. Your future path will be up to you. If you have any doubts, you can contact me through the heavenly Tao. At this moment, Ding Yu and the others were extremely excited. Their master was too powerful. Yes, master. Chu Zan nodded and waved his hand and allowed them to leave. 13th brother, are you leaving? Chu Yun asked. The chaos is so big, so I also want to take a look, Chu Zan smiled. Yuner, you can come with me. Chu Yun shook her head. It's fine, I have to continue teaching the humans in the new world. I still have to protect the Chu family as well. After all, Grandpa really loves me. Chu Zan nodded. He was not surprised by Chu Yun's choice. He raised his hand and pointed, transmitting a stream of fate energy into Chu Yun, giving her the same level of authority within the heavenly Tao as Qin and Funying did. In essence, Chu Yun was also now a divine being of the heavenly Tao, but without the responsibilities. Furthermore, the southern region where the Chu family was located had become a unique small area. People from the outside world were unable to enter. That being said, there were no restrictions on leaving the southern region. Chu Zan suddenly thought of Chu Tianming and chuckled. Chu Tianming had already broken through to the heaven realm, and felt that there was no one who could oppose him in the southern region, which made him somewhat smug and arrogant. He then left the southern region to fight someone, and was promptly defeated. He had just returned to the Chu family's ancestral residence a few days ago and was sulking like a child. Then, Chu Zan thought about his father and mother. There were no traces of them in the 9 zones. It was as if they had never existed in this world. Did he really die in an unknown mystic realm without a trace? Even though Chu Zan was the master of the heavenly Tao, he still could not find any traces of his parents. It was as if these two were not living beings of the 9 zones to begin with. Something was very wrong. Why was this so? He looked at Chu. Could it be that his father had something to do with Chu? However, if there really was a connection with Chu Zan's current strength, he should have been able to see it. Chu Zan felt that he should ask Chu Tianming about his parents. He glanced at Su Shaner, who promptly said, "Of course I'll follow you. I'm your maidservant." Chu Zan nodded. Then, he released the 4 spirit stars chariots and placed the 4 divine beasts into the pocket dimension to give them a level of freedom. Moreover, Chu Zan also felt that the 4 divine beasts were too weak. At the very least, they had to reach the Chaos Supreme Realm. The 4 divine beasts were all creatures blessed by fate. With Chu Zan's guidance, it would not be difficult for them to reach the Chaos Supreme Realm. The current pocket dimension was completely different, and the origin Great Tao had grown significantly. It was not any weaker than the heavenly Tao. Chu Yun left and returned to the new world to continue teaching the new humans. Su Shaner, on the other hand, stayed with him. Chu Zan was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he chose to receive the remaining 100-year milestone reward, the Creation Chaos Scripture. Currently, the system was in the process of updating and restarting. He did not know when the process would be completed, but in the meantime, Chu Zan was free and unrestricted. He could use this time to explore the chaos and perhaps find a new base of operations if the system wanted him to remain in one place again after it updated. The growth of the heavenly Tao was already on the right track. With Chaos Supreme Realm experts protecting it, it was unlikely that anything could threaten it. Moreover, the heavenly Tao talisman was in his possession. Even if there was a problem with the heavenly Tao, he could still intervene immediately. After he received the Creation Chaos scripture, a large amount of insights filled his mind. The Creation Chaos scripture was very special. There was no specific cultivation method, only insights regarding creation, how to create chaos, the great Tao, and living beings. Chuzan then entered a state of enlightenment. When he was comprehending, his entire being seemed to flicker in and out of existence, as if he did not exist in the current timeline. Su Shaner entered the pocket dimension and began her daily cultivation and preparation of food. She was determined to be a good maidservant. Please visit. A long time passed before Chuzan finally woke up from his state of enlightenment. When he did, he discovered that the 3,000 masses of chaotic energy of creation in his body had more than doubled in size. The supreme laws within his body had also grown a great deal. His strength had increased greatly again. Those 3,000 masses of chaotic energy of creation had formed their own chaos, and even their own great Tao within his body, which had surpassed the great Tao of the 9 zones and the heavenly Tao. Chuzan was enlightened. This might be the true great Tao. Although the great Tao of the 9 zones was called a great Tao, it actually had its limitations. Were the supreme laws of the chaos actually a form of the great Tao? Chuzan believed that it was so. Chuzan then thought of his 3,000 chaos bodies of creation and the 3,000 masses of chaotic energy of creation. Would there eventually be 3,000 chaoses in his body? What was beyond the chaos? To understand the situation outside the chaos, one had to transcend the chaos. Chuzan let out a sigh. He still had a long way to go before he could do that, even if he now had a cultivation method that would allow him to transcend the chaos. Chuzan looked at the system. It was still in the process of updating and restarting. He looked at the time and realized that it had been 3 years since he had begun his state of enlightenment. It was time to leave the divine world. He would go to the chaos to travel and explore. With a wave of his hand, Chuzan retrieved the pocket dimension and disconnected it from the divine world. As for the netherworld, the Buddhist world, and the monster world, these would remain in the divine world and heavenly Tao. When Su Shaner left the pocket dimension, her face was filled with joy. "Sir, are we leaving?" Quote, she was very excited that she could finally explore the chaos. In a bit. Before he left, Chuzan had one more thing to deal with, which was regarding the matter of his parents. He stepped forward, and his figure disappeared. Moments later, he appeared outside Chu Tianming's cultivation room. After this old man lost, he had entered a period of bitter cultivation to get stronger to get revenge. Chuzan felt that it was fine as long as the old man was happy. He did not barge in directly, for fear of scaring the old man. He knocked on the door. "I've already said that other than Yuner, no one else is to bother me." Chu Tianming's furious voice came from the cultivation room. Chuzan was speechless. In the entire Chu family, Chu Yun was the only exception when it came to Chu Tianming's anger and behavior. The other members of the Chu family were already used to this. "It's Chuzan." The voice on the other side fell silent. After a while, the door opened. "You're finally willing to leave the small courtyard?" Chu Tianming snorted. Chuzan strode in and looked at his grandpa. His hair was a mess, and he was obviously scratching his head in frustration. "Tell me, what's the matter?" Chu Tianming sighed and his tone softened. Perhaps he was missing his genius third son, Chu Chuluo, again. "I want to ask about my father. Is there anything special regarding his situation?" Chuzan asked. Chu Tianming looked at him in confusion. Even though he was a heaven realm expert, this grandson of his still seemed as weak as ever. It did however seem like he had broken through a major realm, which was probably due to Yuner's efforts. There was a moment of silence. "It's time to tell you something," Chu Tianming finally spoke. "Before your father was born, your grandmother told me that she dreamed of a purple light that fell from the chaos." Chuzan listened quietly. Chuluo was born in a secret place, and I was the only other person present there. At that time, we heard a sound from the great Tao, and the purple light filled the surroundings. Chuzan listened quietly. Chu Tianming looked at him and said with some anger, "Do you think that I'm making things up?" After all, Chu Chuluo's birth was too bizarre. No one would believe it. "How could that be? I definitely believe you," Chuzan said solemnly. He began to wonder if his father was the reincarnation of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert. However, that did not seem right either. How could the reincarnation of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert enter the mortal body? They would all choose to reincarnate in a similar manner as the Lord of Chaos. Chu Tianming stared at Chuzan for a long time, trying to confirm if the latter was being serious. I only figured out that it was the sound of the great Tao after I broke through to the heaven realm, he continued. Chu Zan nodded. Chu Tianming had not been particularly powerful when Chu Chuluo was born, so he naturally would not recognize the sound of the great Tao. When your father was born, there were many strange phenomena and the sound of the great Tao, Buddha. Chu Tianming hesitated for a moment before he continued. I believed that it was a good thing, and was overjoyed. I was convinced that the Chu family would rise under Chuluo's leadership. However, back then, there were some special circumstances that caused your grandmother to pass away within a few years of his birth. It's all my fault for being too weak back then. I didn't even know what happened, Chu Tianming sighed. Your father is a genius. In fact, he had already reached the Void Realm when he was 3 years old. Thanks to Chuluo's existence, the Chu family suppressed the younger generation of the Qin Empire, and he even became a famous genius within the southern region. However, once he reached the Void Realm at the age of 3, his cultivation had stopped advancing. Actually, I think that Chuluo had already surpassed the Void Realm, but did not want to display it openly. I had high hopes for your father, but I also knew that the Qin Empire, and even the southern region, would not be able to hold him back, and that he would leave for greater things one day. I just wanted Chuluo to leave a son or a daughter behind before he left, so that that child could continue to lead the Chu family to prosperity. Chu Tianming suddenly became angry as he spoke. But I never expected that your mother, a wild woman from God knows where, would capture Chuluo's heart and give birth to you. Chu Zan understood. If she had not given birth to such a useless child, Chu Tianming would not have been so angry with his mother, and he would not have constantly borne the brunt of his grandfather's anger. Chu Tianming probably thought that his mother had ruined his father's monstrous bloodline. So, my father is probably not dead. I don't know, Chu Tianming replied dejectedly. Chu Zan's eyes glowed as he looked at Chu Tianming. He could vaguely sense a special Tao aura in Chu Tianming's soul. It was obvious that Chu Tianming did not cultivate it himself. It had to have been left to him by his father. Was it to repay the kindness of raising him? Chu Zan was silent for a moment. This father of his was actually quite mysterious. Of course, his mother was not much different. There was a special Tao aura in Chu Tianming's soul that even Chu Zan could not probe the origins of, despite being a Chaos Supreme Realm expert. This was a testament to how extraordinary it was. You want to look for your father? Chu Tianming looked at Chu Zan and sneered. Don't even think about it, kid. With your strength, you'll just die out there in no time at all. I don't expect you to be successful anymore, he said with a sigh. You'd better stay in the Chu family's territory. I'll arrange a marriage for you one day so that Chuluo's bloodline can be continued. Chu Zan glanced at the old man and did not bother to say anything. Please visit. However, it was clear that Chu Tianming really doted on his father. It was also evident that this father of his was rather mysterious. He was not in the 9 zones, and perhaps not even in the Chaosa. Had he transcended the chaos? How could that be possible? Chu Zan was in disbelief. From Chu Tianming's description, he could tell that Chu Chuluo's birth was unusual. However, Chu Tianming was too weak back then, so he had no idea what had happened. Chu Zan did not delve into his father's background. He just felt that something was off and was curious. He did not even know if he would be able to see his father again. In any case, Chu Zan did not take the old man's words to heart. Old man, it's better for you to continue your closed-door cultivation. I won't disturb you any longer. Chu Zan turned around and left. Chu Tianming looked at his back as he left, his expression complicated. In the end, he sighed. Chuluo. As his own strength increased and he comprehended more things, Chu Tianming naturally understood that Chu Chuluo's background was extraordinary. He took out a jade talisman. Protect Chu Zan, he instructed. Yes, no matter what, Chu Zan was Chu Chuluo's only son. Nothing could be allowed to happen to him. Back then, he was too annoyed and frustrated, so he expelled Chu Zan. It was not that he did not care about his grandson. Chu Zan returned to the small courtyard. With a wave of his hand, he disappeared with Su Shaner. In the boundless chaos, Chu Zan took his time to wander about. Su Shaner was excited as she followed Chu Zan. After coming to the chaos, Chu Zan did not show off and kept a low profile as usual. He saw many living beings of the chaos heading toward the heavenly Tao, probably to enter the heavenly Tao. Not long after Chu Zan left, Chu Tianming received the news that Chu Zan had disappeared. He suddenly felt a sense of loss as he sat in the cultivation room in silence for a long time. After a long while, he sent a message with a hoarse voice: no one is allowed to get close to the small courtyard, and no one is allowed to touch a single blade of grass or tree inside. Of course, that did not include Chu Yun. In the heaven realm, Ding Yu and the others gathered together. It's time to leave this world and explore the chaos. Master has already left, He Yu said. I must become a Chaos Supreme Realm expert, Qianming said firmly. Senior brother, can't you be a little more ambitious? What's the big deal about becoming a Chaos Supreme Realm expert? Master killed one with a single blow. My goal is to surpass the Chaos Supreme Realm, Chu Yi said. Right, we should surpass the Chaos Supreme Realm. Qianming nodded. Don't get carried away. Let's talk about it after we transcend the World Creator Realm, Xiaoliang said in an annoyed tone. Amitabha, it's not difficult to transcend the World Creator Realm, Demon Buddha put his palms together and said. I don't even need to create a world, Hu Tianya said with a smug expression. Qin Ying, Ren Chang, and Du Yuan, who were standing by the side, felt that they were in the wrong place. These personal disciples were too king monstrous. If I hadn't met Master, I probably would never have known that the chaos existed beyond the 9 zones, and that the chaos contained countless worlds and realms. These must be the myriad realms that Master was talking about, Ren Chang said with a sigh. I think the myriad realms that Master mentioned might be outside of the chaos, He Yu said. Ren Chang was stunned. He felt that the myriad realms that Chu Zan had mentioned were not outside the chaos, but outside the world. It's because Master was afraid that you wouldn't be able to bear it if he spoke the truth. That's why he only spoke so vaguely about it, Ding Yu said with a smile. Ren Chang came to a realization. So it was like this. Where did that Kingslayer guy go? Wang Luo asked as he looked around. I'm here, Kingslayer shouted as he rushed over. Feng Tong was beside him. Since everyone is here, let's go, Ding Yu waved his hand and said. Take care of yourselves in the chaos. We'll meet again in 1,000,000 years. Alright, see you in 1,000,000 years. The group left the Heavenly Dao and arrived in the chaos. They all split up and went to explore the chaos. Hong Yuanchu sighed. He did not leave. He was too weak. Moreover, the human race needed to have some experts present in the divine world. Somewhere in the heaven realm, Chu stood up, and Zan, Shui Lian, and she followed beside him. Ancestor Qin, I'm going to leave, Chu said. Qin nodded. We'll meet again if we're fated to. Perhaps we'll meet again after I break through to the Chaos Supreme Chaos Realm. Ji also cupped his hands and left. The human race's future development will depend on the human race itself. It's time for me to find my own path of cultivation. After Sha cupped his fists, he also left. Yun has been reborn. Do you want to go and see her? Qin asked Mei. Mei fell silent. Yun was her sister, but she was no longer the same person as before. In the end, Yun was no longer in this world. However, she has a new life. The past is the past, Qin continued. Then, can I accompany Qian? Mei asked hesitantly. You can, but you must seal your strength. Then I'm willing to accompany Qian. Mei nodded. With a wave of her hand, she sealed her strength, limiting it to the 100,000-mile mark. Then, Qin waved his hand and sent her away. The Wu person you mentioned has been resurrected, and he has received a great opportunity, Qin continued. That's great. Please send my regards to Wu, Chu said with cupped hands. I won't meet him. I'm a divine being of the heavenly Tao, and have to maintain my distance. I'll say hello to Wu on your behalf, Ji's voice suddenly rang out. Thank you, Chu laughed. Ji's avatar was in charge of the reincarnation cycle. With a wave of his hand, Qin sent the 3 of them away from the divine world and out into the chaos. He still had to return and make arrangements for the human race's Daoyuan realm cultivators. Qin then briefly stood still, and suddenly laughed. Perhaps, this was the best ending for him. Back then, he had planned for a long time in order to control the great Tao of the 9 zones. He had wanted to rely on this to reach a higher level. Now, he had become a divine being of the heavenly Tao. As long as the heavenly Tao was not destroyed, he would not die. Please visit. Furthermore, the potential of the heavenly Tao was boundless, so he would eventually be able to reach the Chaos Supreme Realm. His figure dispersed and returned to the heavenly Tao. It was his duty to maintain the order of the heavenly Tao. As for the heavenly spirit cat, the spirit-devouring flower, and the sky-shaking golden rock, they were all creatures of the heavenly Tao, but would not interfere with the heavenly Tao or his responsibilities. Perhaps, they would only take action when the heavenly Tao was truly facing a crisis. However, would the heavenly Tao still face a crisis at this point? It was very unlikely. Furthermore, he was not the only divine being of the heavenly Tao, there was also Funying, who had once been an ancient chaos god. Qin appeared in front of a large tortoise and chatted with it. However, this large tortoise liked to sleep. Then, his consciousness arrived at the river of time, where Huanglong was. After the heavenly Tao grew stronger, so did Huanglong. To some extent, Huanglong already possessed the power of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert. Qin chatted with him and told him about his adventures in the chaos. As expected, Huanglong was very interested. At the same time, in the chaos, ancient god Pan Meng was exploring the chaos. He was Huanglong's pawn and was playing about in the chaos on behalf of Huanglong. Every time Qin spoke of a new event in the chaos, ancient god Pan Meng would excitedly run over to witness it. In terms of status, Huanglong definitely occupied the highest position in the entire heavenly Tao. Therefore, it was a wise choice to build a good relationship with Huanglong. Qin inwardly looked down on Funying. He was a blockhead who only knew how to maintain the order of the heavenly Tao. Funying had been neighbors with his incarnation for a long time, and they were old acquaintances, but the former still maintained his muddle-headed ways. With the opening of the heavenly Tao, quite a few living beings from the chaos had come to the heavenly Tao. Many forces also wanted to pass down their own legacies within the heavenly Tao. Anyone with eyes could all see that the heavenly Tao would become the center of chaos, and that it had endless potential. Many experts entered, so it was inevitable that fights would break out. The experts from the ancient chaos world who had originally left returned one after another. After all, the ancient chaos world had already been incorporated into the heavenly Tao. They naturally saw the ancient chaos world as their own territory, and fought several battles with the forces from the chaos. Qin and Funying did not interfere. As long as it did not affect the heavenly Tao or cause any of the races to be exterminated, they would not interfere. In the new world, in a human city, a 3-year-old boy was holding a bead in his hand. The bead seemed to contain endless malice. One could vaguely sense a ferocious and terrifying figure inside the bead. However, the little boy was not afraid at all. Instead, he poked the figure in the bead with his finger. Every time he poked the bead, he would hear a faint scream and angry roar from it. For some reason, every time the little boy heard this voice, he would laugh very happily. No matter how bad his mood was, it would become better. Moreover, even though he was only 3 years old, he was already a first-level Tao realm cultivator. A graceful figure walked out of the small courtyard. "Little Qian, it's time to eat." "All right," he said. The boy stood up and ran towards the graceful figure. She smiled very gently and very happily. The boy looked at his beautiful and gentle sister, and then at the burly man who was walking over from a distance. He asked, "Is she really my bride?" Quote. Wu's face twitched as he looked at Mei. When Mei glared at him sharply, he quickly nodded and said, "Yes, she's your bride." Qian scratched his head and patted the bead with his palm. He muttered, "But I'm only 3 years old. She's already so old." Mo Yao's consciousness let out a series of screams. Why did Qian reincarnate? Furthermore, why was he still being subjected to this torture? Mei hugged him in her arms and smiled like a flower. Her eyes were full of gentleness. "You can't escape me in this life." Wu sighed and turned to leave. What an ill-fated relationship. Forget it, so be it. Perhaps Ancestor Qian would accept it if he regained his memories of his previous life. As for Mo Yao, he had brought endless pain and torture to Qian, so it was time for him to suffer. Mei smiled happily and hugged Qian, kissing his tender face. He then took out a small needle and handed it to little Qian. "If you use this to poke the bead, the demon inside will scream even louder." Mo Yao's screams indeed became louder after a while. Chu Zan brought Su Shaner along as he toured the chaos. He saw many forces of the chaos as well as chaotic beings. After passing through many worlds created by experts, some of them were extremely powerful, he came to the conclusion that they were not as complete as the divine world. Many of them were worlds created by ancient chaos gods, and some of them were created and sustained using supreme treasures. A number of the worlds were already ownerless. Their creators had either given up on them, or had died. Some of these worlds were then occupied by other experts or forces, who occasionally managed to obtain the inheritances left behind by the creators of these worlds. Some worlds had not been discovered yet. Chu Zan also explored many chaos abysses. Some were used to deprecate the old laws of the chaos, while others were used to suppress enemies of certain experts. As he toured the chaos, he saw all sorts of things. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. The system was still in the process of updating and restarting. Chuzan even suspected that the system had crashed. As such, it was obviously unrealistic to rely on the system to quickly increase his strength and transcend the chaos. He could only rely on himself. For the rest of the journey, Chuzan explored the chaos while cultivating. His strength was increasing at every moment. However, he was still a good distance from transcending the chaos. This year, he and Su Shaner arrived at a huge chaos abyss. This chaos abyss was like a huge black hole with a terrifying suction force. Even those who had transcended the world creator realm would be sucked in, unable to escape. Only those who had reached the limits of that realm would be able to escape its clutches, but not without encountering dangers. Su Shaner looked at this terrifying chaos abyss and exclaimed, "This is too terrifying." Chuzan looked down at the abyss. At the bottom of the abyss, he could see a powerful figure being suppressed. Although the power of suppression had gradually weakened after Ju's death, it was still in effect. The person inside clearly wanted to break out of the seal, but it would take them at least 100,000 years to do so. This chaos abyss was suppressing an expert who had just broken through to the Chaos Supreme Realm. This person was probably the last person to break through to the Chaos Supreme Realm before Ju blocked the path. Unfortunately, he was not lucky, and had been suppressed by Ju. Chuzan raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. A giant hand was condensed from his supreme power, which passed through layers of seals and barriers within the chaos abyss, and grabbed that person and yanked him out. The other party was in a daze. It took him a long time to come back to his senses. Then, he was shocked. "Please visit." He had actually been saved. "Senior, many thanks for rescuing me. Do your best to maintain the order of the chaos. Ju is no more," Chuzan said indifferently. "Yes, I will definitely heed Senior's words." After being suppressed for countless years, it was easy to imagine how excited he was to be free. Moreover, his enemy, Ju, had already died. He was greatly shocked. Such a powerful Chaos Supreme Realm expert had actually died. Were Chaos Supreme Realm experts not supposed to be immortal? After Chuzan rescued the person, his figure flashed and disappeared. The Chaos Supreme Realm expert also disappeared and stepped into the Supreme Primal Chaos space. Time passed by quickly. 1,000 years passed, yet the system was still in the processing of updating and restarting. Chuzan did not continue his tour of the chaos, but instead traveled to a place near the edge of the chaos. Looking from afar, he could see the supreme laws of the chaos. They were constantly rolling, like waves, expanding outwards. Previously, when the system allowed him to see the supreme laws of the chaos, Chuzan saw two chaoses getting closer and closer, almost touching each other. The clash between chaoses would eventually come. No one knew what was going on inside the other chaos. The fusion of the two chaoses would definitely result in conflicts between the inhabitants of both sides. Moreover, the chaos would collide and fuse with each other, which would definitely cause a tremendous calamity. A large number of the weaker living beings would die. The chaos calamity. When Chuzan looked at the supreme laws, which were constantly expanding outward, some special insights appeared in his mind. At this point, he had already felt an inexplicable resistance pulling him back, and keeping him from leaving the chaos. Only those who had transcended the chaos could break away from it. Weaker Chaos Supreme Realm experts would not even be able to see the edge of the chaos and would be blocked, unable to move forward. Chuzan was sure that he was the only one in the chaos who could see the edge of the chaos. Back then, the Lord of Chaos had wanted to transcend the chaos, but he had incurred a great tribulation, and failed and died. Chuzan suspected that the reason why there were so few Chaos Supreme Realm experts in the chaos was most likely due to many having perished like the Lord of Chaos as they attempted to transcend the chaos. There was a small residence in the chaos, which housed a miniature world. It was floating in the chaos. As the boundaries of the chaos expanded outward, it continued to advance. Chuzan was used to staying at home, so after touring the chaos, that was exactly what he did again. However, unlike when he had the system, he was now in secluded cultivation, striving to transcend the chaos as soon as possible. Su Shaner would often sit at the entrance of the residence, looking at the vast chaos, sinking into an inexplicable state. She could not see the edge of the chaos. However, she could sense that this place was somewhat special. Here, she almost seemed to be able to comprehend the true meaning of the chaos. She often came here to cultivate, and her strength increased by leaps and bounds because of this. Furthermore, if there was anything she did not understand, Chuzan would also explain it to her. Only she and Chuzan lived here. Was it boring? Su Shaner did not think so. As long as she stayed by Chuzan's side, she was very satisfied. This was the first time Chuzan had truly gone into closed-door cultivation. The chaotic energy of creation in his body continued to surge out. His strength was constantly increasing. The cultivation method to transcend the chaos was truly a wonderful thing. After Chuzan's departure, the heavenly Tao continued to develop, fueled by the addition of half of the supreme powers of those 4 punished Chaos Supreme Realm experts. Within a short 1,000 years, 1/3 of the heavenly Tao laws had already encroached into one of the supreme laws. The heavenly Tao had expanded more than 100 times outward into the chaos. The divine world had expanded by more than 10 times. It had truly become the center of the chaos, and many living beings of the chaos continued to flock there. Some defeated and dying forces and cultivators fled to the divine world to avoid their enemies and preserve their legacy. Those who had surpassed the 100,000-mile mark would not be able to enter the heavenly Tao. This made it somewhat of a safe haven. Furthermore, if it was a new race, it would receive special protection from the heavenly Tao when it was on the verge of extinction. This was in order to preserve the diversity of races within the heavenly Tao. It was an era where all of the races coexisted. Furthermore, the divine world was vast and still expanding. Despite the influx of living beings, there was still plenty of room in the divine world. In this era, the human race had displayed great tenacity and drive. Among all the races in the divine world, the human race occupied the most territory and was also the richest. Furthermore, they were the strongest. After them, were the monsters and the Buddhists. The ghost race was not weak either. The new world had already been connected to the divine world, and the living beings there possessed more of the heavenly Tao's fate energy. The heavenly Tao was developing and thriving, constantly expanding. 1,000 years passed. Some of the experts of the chaos who did not know what had happened back then were naturally tempted and attempted to sneak into the heavenly Tao or plot against it. Feng Ying ignored them and simply watched the situation develop. They were destined for failure even if he did not intervene. There was a new person who had transcended the world creator realm who tried to force his way into the heavenly Tao. Qin did not know where the other party got his courage from, but was also not bothered to intervene. That person who had forcefully barged into the heavenly Tao was ultimately punished by the heavenly Tao laws and suppressed within the heavenly Tao, becoming nourishment for the heavenly Tao and its living beings. The suppression would last for 1,000 years. The chaos was very lively. It was as if they had entered a new era. Geniuses appeared in large numbers. The Chaos Supreme Realm experts maintained the order of the chaos and protected the growth of the geniuses of the chaos. In a short 1,000 years, many geniuses had become famous throughout the chaos. Somewhere in the chaos, in front of a huge mountain that was like an unsheathed sword, a Tao path was faintly visible. The Tao path was like a long sword. Please visit. This was the residence of a certain expert of the sword Tao in the chaos. In this chaotic region, he was also very famous. The founder was a sword Tao expert who had transcended the world creator realm. It was rumored that he had killed an ancient chaos god and obtained an opportunity to break through. He could be considered a veteran expert among those who had transcended the world creator realm. On this day, a young man with a long sword in his arms came to the foot of the Sword Mountain. I've heard that the Sword Mountain's Zhu Jian has extraordinary talent and unparalleled sword Tao. As a fellow genius of the younger generation, I'm here to challenge you. From the Sword Mountain, a sword beam flashed. Sword maniac Ding Yu, who gave you the courage to challenge me? Cut the crap, let's talk with our swords. Ding Yu then attacked. Zhu Jian was a disciple of the founder, and a world creator realm expert. Despite this, Ding Yu was still not afraid. He was already on the verge of reaching the world creator realm, and needed an impetus to break through. However, he would not create a world. He wanted to walk an entirely different path, just like Ji. Sword beams flashed, and the battle was extremely intense. In an instant, the nearby experts all rushed over to watch the battle. The sword maniac Ding Yu was rumored to be a genius from the heavenly Tao, an invincible existence among his peers. This time, he had actually challenged Zhu Jian from Sword Mountain, a world creator realm expert, and a genius in his own right. The founder of Sword Mountain watched the battle silently. Ding Yu was extremely powerful. Although his cultivation level was not as high as Zhu Jian's, he was not at a disadvantage. Instead, his attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer. The expression of the founder of Sword Mountain was cold. Sword Mountain could not lose. However, all of a sudden, an illusory but majestic figure appeared in the vicinity, shocking him. He sat upright and did not dare to move. The shadow of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert. It was here to protect the geniuses. No expert was allowed to bully the weak. There was once an expert who tried to kill a genius, but he was killed by the shadow of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert. It was an unwritten rule in the chaos that the older generation experts were not allowed to interfere in the battles between geniuses. They could save their own disciples and juniors. But he could not attack the other party. Otherwise, death was certain. This was a rule that was set by the Chaos Supreme Realm experts, so no one dared to disobey it. The battle continued for a day. In the end, Ding Yu broke through to the World Creator Realm and defeated Zhu Jian with a single sword strike. After defeating Zhu Jian, Ding Yu turned around and left. Outside a certain realm, a huge white tiger was crouching outside the boundary. "Hey you, come out and fight." There was no response from within the realm. Outside another realm, Xiao Liang wielded his spear and fought 18 geniuses in a row. No one below the World Creator Realm could withstand the power of his spear. In the end, it was the master of the realm, a World Creator Realm expert who was forced to fight him. The two sides fought for a day and a night, before Xiao Liang finally nailed the other party to the ground with his spear. Even the master of a realm was defeated. After this battle, Xiao Liang had also stepped into the ranks of World Creator Realm experts. Somewhere in the chaos, a terrifying flame furnace was constantly devouring and refining everything. A dangerous land was collapsing continuously. Bits and pieces of it were swept into the furnace and refined into a unique big pill. Wang Luo was panting slightly. "It's still a little too big. I have to continue refining it. I have to make it the size of a normal pill." Terrifying flames filled a certain realm, as Shang Xing's consciousness emerged within the flames. Refining a realm is a little difficult. It will take more than 100 years to refine it into a powerful supreme treasure. He sighed and continued refining. Heiyu had a transcendent aura as she traveled through a chaos abyss. She was holding a person in her palm. It was a rock, which had managed to give birth to a wisp of consciousness. "I won't dare to do it again. Please spare me," Panshi begged. "Don't worry, I won't kill you." Heiyu's tone was calm, as usual, without any emotional fluctuations. A certain place in the chaos was currently experiencing a calamity. Terrifying bolts of lightning continued to strike the area. Countless living beings howled miserably as they scattered in all directions. Most of them were turned to dust by the lightning. The owner of the place was extremely pale. He watched as the youth left the place calmly. The lightning bolts seemed to avoid him. He wanted to attack and kill this young man. However, his spirit was shaken. A powerful bolt of lightning had already locked onto him and was about to descend the very next moment. His heart was filled with regret. He should not have ended up like this because of his greed. Recalling the words of that youth, he felt even more terrified. "You dare to covet my treasure? Don't you know that any living being that covets my treasures and has ill intentions towards me will be plagued by calamities? You, including your city, will definitely suffer a great calamity." At that time, he had scoffed and locked the young man up. In the end, the great calamity had really arrived. Boom! A terrifying bolt of lightning descended. The owner tried his best, but it was to no avail. He was reduced to ashes by the lightning. The city had also collapsed. Chu Yi looked back and shook his head. He had already warned them that it would be troublesome if they provoked him, but they did not believe it. He sighed inwardly. He had never fought to his heart's content ever since he had ventured out into the chaos. It was common for his enemies to encounter all sorts of misfortunes and calamities after offending him. How tragic! Even if an expert attacked him, it would be the same. Once, he was injured by an expert. While he was escaping, the expert who chased him suffered one calamity after another. In the end, he was even devoured by a giant chaotic being. There were not many chaotic beings in the entire chaos, and it was extremely rare to come across one. It just so happened that he had encountered it when the other party was chasing after Chu Yi. Moreover, the giant chaotic being seemed to be displeased with that expert and swallowed him directly. Please visit. Was it a coincidence? It was difficult to believe. Chu Yi shook his head helplessly and continued exploring the chaos. He was afraid that it would be impossible for him to have a proper battle. He had once encountered an expert who had transcended the World Creator realm. This expert did not dare to kill him due to the rules, so he only taught him a lesson and injured him. However, after that, the expert would be struck by lightning every few days. In the end, he even fell into a dangerous place and lost an arm. From then on, calamities struck one after another, and that expert was now in a half-crippled state. It was too tragic. After this news spread, Those who could recognize Chu-yi ran away whenever they saw him, terrified that calamity would befall them as well. The only ones who dared to provoke him were those who had never heard of his name or those who had heard of him but could not recognize him. Chu-yi was in a melancholic mood. He decided to change his identity and continue exploring the chaos to make a few friends. If he did not hide his identity, no one would dare to be friends with him for fear of attracting trouble. In fact, as long as there was no malice toward him, there would not be any disaster. Why did each and every one of them have bad intentions towards him? Within a certain place in the chaos, Demon Buddha was dressed in snow-white clothes and sitting upright on the lotus platform. The Buddhist light around him was dense, and the sound of chanting echoed in the surroundings. He was giving a lecture. Below him were many living beings who were all immersed in the Buddhist Dharma, even the leader of this particular force, who was a world creator realm expert. At this moment, they were all sitting down with their hands clasped together, their heads lowered, looking extremely pious. From now on, this force would become part of the Buddhist sect. Qianming was currently engaged in an intense battle with a few geniuses of the chaos. Kingslayer was being pursued, and Chu Pingfan had killed a chaotic being with his saber. Ever since they left the Heavenly Tao to venture into the chaos, Ding Yu and the others had made quite a name for themselves, and were known to be invincible within the same level. There were naturally many geniuses who wanted to fight with them. However, they had never been defeated. The chaos was very lively. Geniuses rose and roamed the chaos, and order was maintained. All of the top powers in the chaos abided by the same rule to allow geniuses to grow and develop. Time passed by quickly. Chu Zan's small residence was still moving forward in tandem with the expansion of the chaos. They were already 1 trillion miles away from their original position. On this day, under Chu Zan's guidance, Su Shaner had finally broken through to become a world creator realm expert. Chu Zan looked at the system. It was still in the midst of a new update, and seemed to be completely stuck. He could not count on the system. He could only rely on his own cultivation to transcend the chaos as soon as possible. Perhaps, the system would only complete its update and restart after he transcended the chaos. He looked at the supreme laws of the chaos, which had already been infiltrated by the Heavenly Tao laws. The current Heavenly Tao could already accommodate Chaos Supreme Realm existences, so Huanglong and the other two had already reached that realm. Qin and Fengying were still a bit lacking in comparison. The development of the Heavenly Tao was all on the right path, and did not require Chu Zan's attention. He believed that the next time he came out of secluded cultivation, the Heavenly Tao laws would have already occupied one of the supreme laws of the chaos. He entered secluded cultivation once again, and Su Shaner followed suit. Chu Zan did not know when he would be able to transcend the chaos. It seemed to be out of reach, but he did not stop cultivation. The chaotic energy of creation continued to surge within his body. He cultivated for a long time, for 100,000 years. Chu Zan woke up from his cultivation session and sighed. It felt like he was just taking a nap, yet 100,000 years had already passed. He was also old. When he looked at the system again, it was still in the process of updating and restarting. With this, he was basically almost certain that the system would only complete the update process after he transcended the chaos. Sir, Su Shaner appeared in front of him with a smile. She had been cultivating for 100,000 years, and she had woken up twice. This was the third time. Even to a world creator realm cultivator, 100,000 years was not a long time. During this time, only those who had reached a certain level could live for this long, and many things had changed within the chaos. Chu Zan raised his head and looked outside. A giant chaotic being appeared outside the residence. It was extremely huge, and not much smaller than the 9 territories. It had the body of an elephant and the head of a bull. Its nostrils spewed out chaotic energy that looked like 2 small tornadoes. This was not the first time Chu Zan had seen a chaotic being. When he had first arrived at the edge of chaos, he had some as well. These chaotic beings were not particularly intelligent and relied on their powerful bodies to roam the chaos. This one seemed to be feeding on the chaotic energy remnants that leaked out when the supreme laws expanded further outward. It was no weaker than an expert who had transcended the world creator realm. Chu Zan waved his hand and a piece of meat appeared. It was dug out from the body of that chaotic being. A piece of meat that was much bigger than Chu Zan's entire body was no different from being bitten by a mosquito for that chaotic being, so it did not react at all. Shaner, try cooking this meat and see if it's delicious. Su Shaner was momentarily stunned. He had dug out a piece of meat just like that. She herself had tried to do the same earlier. However, with her strength, her attacks could not even leave a mark on the body of the chaotic being. She could not even get its attention. I'll go prepare the condiments now. Su Shaner was extremely excited. Such a terrifying chaotic being should have delicious meat, right? Given its powerful physical body, would eating it also improve one's physical body? Su Shaner prepared the ingredients, then she threw the meat into a large cauldron. After adding in the seasonings, she used her fire Dao principle to cook it. The spices she used were all top-grade treasures. The cauldron was an ultimate chaos supreme treasure. However, the meat of this chaotic being was extraordinary. It would take a long time to cook it even with these tools. The longer it was stewed, the more flavorful it would become. The small residence seemed insignificant in front of the chaotic being, and it was completely ignored by it. The chaotic being then yawned and laid down in the chaos, actually dozing off. Please visit. Its massive body was floating in the chaos. With a thought, the small residence suddenly disappeared. The next moment, the residence appeared on the back of the chaotic being. Chu Zan checked the heavenly Tao. 100,000 years had passed, and the heavenly Tao laws had now occupied one of the 9 supreme laws of the chaos. Now, it was encroaching on the other 8 supreme laws. Given enough time, the heavenly Tao laws would completely replace the supreme laws of the chaos. Chu Zan was very pleased with the rapid development of the heavenly Tao. Chu Zan checked the Great Tao Communication Group. It had been a long time since he had paid attention to it. Hong Yuanchu and the others were still active in the group. After so many years, Hong Yuanchu had finally reached the 100,000-mile mark. The Tao realm cultivators in the group had all broken through to the Taoyuan realm. Motu's strength had also reached the 100,000-mile mark. After Demon Buddha left the heavenly Tao, Buddha Nanwu and Motu became the leaders of the Buddhist sect within the heavenly Tao. Today, Buddhism was flourishing. The ghost race had also become stronger. Yuer and Long Tang had both reached the 100,000-mile mark. It was worth mentioning that the demonic Tao had also started to become active in the divine world. The demon race had already become history, but the demonic Tao was open to all. The human race was still the most powerful race in the divine world. There were countless geniuses. Chu Zan thought for a moment and opened up a new group using the Origin Tao Ring. He injected the auras of Ding Yu and the other disciples into the group. They could contact each other through this group. Chu Yun was also added to the group by Chu Zan. In addition to his 9 disciples, a few people who were more fated were also pulled into this group. Qin and Feng Ying were among them. Ji, Hong Yuanchu, Mo Tu, and Long Tang, as well as a few existences who had reached the Taoyuan realm together with them, were also pulled in. These people could be considered his followers. Chu Zan simply mentioned the purpose of this group and no longer cared about it. Kingslayer was unusually active and began to show off his strength. He even secretly expressed that he would return to the divine world to beat up Hong Yuanchu. He had finally surpassed Hong Yuanchu, the great ancestor, and his ego was inflated. Hong Yuanchu's face darkened. However, he was helpless. This fellow, Kingslayer, had actually caught up. He sighed and decided to venture out into the chaos. The group started to get lively. They were all talking about their own experiences in the chaos. I don't even have a single friend, Chu Yi said with a bitter expression. The group fell silent for a moment. Ding Yu and the others had all heard about Chu Yi's feats. It was simply terrifying. Junior brother, the strong are all lonely. You only need us, Ding Yu consoled him. Chu Zan stood on the back of the chaotic being and observed the expansion of the chaos. Compared to the 3,000 masses of chaotic energy of creation in his body, the chaos was more powerful. The more he observed the edges of the chaos, the more he gained insights. He finally felt that he could reach the boundaries of transcending the chaos. It was no longer out of reach. The meat of the chaotic being took 10 years to stew before it was ready to eat. Su Shaner only ate a small piece, but soon felt that her Tao path had become more solid, and her physical body continued to strengthen. She could not eat any more. Chu Zan divided the remaining meat into portions and sent it to Ding Yu and his other disciples. He ate the rest by himself. It had to be said that the meat of the chaotic being could greatly strengthen one's physical body, and also stabilize the Tao paths of those who had reached the world creator realm. Of course, it was also very tasty. The small residents stayed on the back of the chaotic being and followed it around. These chaotic beings would always stay around the edges of the chaos. From time to time, Chu Zan would cut off some meat from it. A portion of it was refined into medicinal pills. Another portion was used by Su Shan'er to make various kinds of dried meat items. The remaining portion was naturally stored for cooking. Chu Zan did not limit himself to just this chaotic being. Whenever the residents passed by any chaotic being, he would cut off a little bit of its meat. The effects of the different meats were also different. Some could even strengthen one's soul. There was a type of chaotic being whose meat could actually strengthen one's soul. After 100 years of relaxation, Chu Zan once again entered secluded cultivation. Despite now feeling that transcending the chaos was within reach, he still needed a long period of time to achieve it. Time passed by quickly. In the blink of an eye, 1,000,000 years had passed. To most living beings, it was an extremely long time. Many changes had taken place in the divine world, and many geniuses had risen up, especially within the human race. The human race had reached its most prosperous period in history, as they were united by a particularly dazzling human genius. The other powerful races paled in comparison to the human race. Demonic cultivators had also appeared in the human race. However, it was different from the demon race cultivators. The demonic Tao had already gone through several changes. However, after the unification of the human race by that genius, the suppression of the demonic Tao intensified. In the divine world, there were 3 alliances, which existed to keep each other in check. The divine world continued to expand. Please visit. It seemed to be boundless. Even after 1,000,000 years of development, it had yet to be fully explored or populated. This was especially true for the Heaven Realm, as there were not that many Daoyuan realm cultivators. The vast and boundless Heaven Realm almost seemed empty, partly due to the fact that most of the Daoyuan realm cultivators were in secluded cultivation. In fact, no one knew where in the Heaven Realm where they might stumble upon someone who was cultivating in seclusion. The netherworld was getting stronger. The reincarnation cycle was also more complete and stronger. There were also geniuses who managed to comprehend the true essence of reincarnation and even used it to escape from their enemies. After reincarnating with their memories intact, they rose up once more and successfully took revenge. Ding Yu and the others eventually returned to the divine world. After spending a few years together, they once more ventured out into the chaos. All of them had reached the world creator realm. However, he still had no idea how to break through and transcend the world creator realm, as it required the right opportunity and diligent cultivation. Of course, breaking through was not a problem at all. It was just a matter of time. When Hong Yuanchu was venturing through the chaos, he met his ancestor. Hong had already transcended the world creator realm. The human race was no longer considered weak. Even though its foundation could not be compared to the ancient chaos gods, they had 4 experts who had transcended the world creator realm, who were Chu, Sha, Ji, and Hong. Among them, Chu was the strongest. Furthermore, there was Qin, a divine being of the heavenly Tao. It was rumored that he had reached the chaos supreme realm. It could be said that the human race had truly become a powerful race in the chaos. However, recently, the entire chaos was divided into 2 camps, with the heavenly Tao on one side, and the chaos on the other. Regardless of whether it was the human race, the immortal race, the celestial race, or any other race within the heavenly Tao, they were all collectively called the heavenly Tao race. Those beyond the heavenly Tao were known as the chaos race. There was also a faint sense of competition between them. The experts who came from the heavenly Tao, regardless of race, would stand on the same side when facing the chaos race. It was the same for the chaos race. For the time being, there were no obvious conflicts. However, there were already signs that pointed toward conflicts erupting in the future. Perhaps in the future, the heavenly Tao race and the chaos race would have a great battle to determine who was the true leader of the chaos. Chu Zan opened his eyes. This time, he had finally touched the edge of transcending the chaos. It was no longer out of reach. In at most 10,000,000 years, he would be able to transcend the chaos. He woke up from his cultivation, and so did Su Shan'er. The small residence was still on the back of the chaotic being, which was wandering around the edges of the chaos. Chu Zan glanced at heavenly Tao, which was now 2/3 of the way into occupying another supreme law of the chaos. Cultivation within the heavenly Tao was no longer limited to the divine world, as the heavenly Tao had expanded far and wide. Chu Zan believed that in the future, the heavenly Tao would become the mainstream pathway of cultivation within the chaos. He also discovered that the chaos had changed. The heavenly Tao race and the chaos race. Competition was inevitable. This was a process that the heavenly Tao had to go through to infiltrate and occult the other supreme laws. The conflicts would not happen just once either. It was bound to happen over a prolonged period of time. Chu Zan looked at Su Shan'er's cultivation level. She had reached the peak of the World Creator realm. However, if she wanted to break through and transcend the World Creator realm, it would still take some time. This was also true for his disciples. Chu Zan decided to help them out. First, he preached the Tao to Su Shan'er, and then gave her a ball of chaotic energy of creation, which would allow her to quickly break through and transcend the World Creator realm. Following that, Chu Zan also did the same for Ding Yu and his other disciples. They were considered the figureheads of the heavenly Tao race, and it would not be good if they were at a disadvantage when going up against the Chaos race. The competition between the two races would mainly be between the experts who were below 10 million years old. Chu Zan also realized that there were already some extremely powerful geniuses from the Chaos. Thanks to his help, Ding Yu and the other disciples were able to break through and transcend the World Creator realm within a short time. With their monstrous talent and strength, they would be able to tilt the balance in favor of the heavenly Tao race. This was especially true for He Yu and Chu Yi, who were both very special. Chu Zan did not continue his secluded cultivation. Instead, he walked out of the small residence and stared at the edge of the ever-expanding chaos, wondering how long it would take for the two chaoses to collide. Suddenly, at the edge of the chaos, he spotted a broken and charred corpse. The corpse was still emitting an extremely powerful aura, and was surrounded by supreme power. The corpse of a Chaos Supreme Realm expert. Chu Zan sighed. It was no wonder that there were so few Chaos Supreme Realm experts in the Chaos. Other than the two old men, the rest were relatively young. This fallen Chaos Supreme Realm expert was from the same era as the Lord of Chaos, and had obviously perished while trying to transcend the Chaos. These chaotic beings were also from the first batch of living beings in the Chaos. They actually wanted to leave the Chaos and transcend it. That was why they were wandering the edges of the Chaos. Chu Zan waved his hand, and the corpse dispersed, and its bones scattered into the Chaos. The bones of this Chaos Supreme Realm expert would be a great opportunity to those who could obtain them, and could be considered a method of preserving this expert's legacy. 100 years later, Chu Zan once again entered secluded cultivation. 3 million years later, Chu Zan felt something. He opened his eyes and looked towards the Chaos. The first battle between the Heavenly Tao race and the Chaos race had begun. With the Chaos Supreme Realm experts maintaining order, Chu Zan was not worried that it would spiral out of control. The result of the first clash between the two races was as he expected. With Ding Yu and his other disciples around, even though there were some monstrous geniuses in the Chaos, they were still no match for his disciples. The Heavenly Tao race had emerged victorious in this battle, which prompted more and more living beings to join the Heavenly Tao. Not long after, the Heavenly Tao occupied another one of the Supreme Chaos Laws. The other Chaos Supreme Realm experts were all looking at the Supreme Laws in shock, realizing how unbelievable Chu Zan's plan was. At this rate, the Supreme Laws of the Chaos would be unified under the Heavenly Tao. The Divine World would also occupy a larger area of the Chaos. They all realized that it was impossible for the Chaos race to win. The appearance of the Chaos race and their struggle with the Heavenly Tao race was merely a development that was inevitable in the process of the Heavenly Tao's rise. At this moment, these Chaos Supreme Realm experts were all trying to comprehend the Heavenly Tao laws to prepare themselves for that eventuality. As the development of the Heavenly Tao was proceeding very smoothly, after Chu Zan kept an eye on it for a while, he continued to cultivate in seclusion. Chu Zan thought of the other chaos that was about to collide with this chaos. That would be a great calamity, in which both chaoses would either be fused or destroyed. During this period, there would definitely be a great upheaval. The Chaos Supreme Realm experts from both sides were bound to fight. Chu Zan was uncertain about the situation in that chaos, and whether it too contained the 9 supreme laws of the chaos. If so, it would definitely be inferior to the Heavenly Tao if the Heavenly Tao laws managed to occupy and unify the 9 supreme laws of the chaos. Still, he had to make some preparations. He knew that there were more than 2 chaoses out there, and that the collision with another chaos was not a one-time thing. According to what he saw when he transcended chaos, eventually, there would only be one chaos, though that would likely only happen after an extremely and uncountable time. Once the Heavenly Tao occupied and unified the 9 supreme laws of the chaos, as the master of the Heavenly Tao, how strong would he become? Chu Zan was excited just thinking about it. The chaoses would fuse together to form a single chaos. Chu Zan had no idea how long this process would take. In fact, he did not even know how many chaoses there were, or whether it was possible for the heavenly Tao to unite all of them. Still, there was no harm in trying, so he decided to make it his eventual goal. He would start with this chaos. However, if one wanted to understand the secrets of chaos, one had to first transcend the chaos. Chuzan put his plans aside and immersed himself in cultivation again. He was very interested in what was beyond the chaos. Cultivation knew no time. In the blink of an eye, 10 million years had passed. At this moment, Chuzan's figure became hazy and illusory. It was as if it no longer existed in the chaos. Su Shaner looked at him in surprise. At a certain moment, Chuzan opened his eyes. His expression was calm, and his body slowly solidified. However, she could feel that the same hazy and illusory sensation was still there. At this moment, Chuzan felt that he only needed to take a single step to transcend the chaos. However, he stopped himself. He needed to make some arrangements before leaving the chaos. Otherwise, if he left abruptly, the other Chaos Supreme Realm experts might start to get ideas about the heavenly Tao and the chaos. Of course, they probably would not dare to act anytime soon, but as the millenniums passed by, who knew what they might try to do? Moreover, with the collision of the two chaoses imminent, he had to ensure that the heavenly Tao stood at an absolute advantage over the other side. 10 million years passed. The heavenly Tao laws had once again infiltrated and occupied another supreme law of the chaos. Chuzan looked at Su Shaner. The living beings of the chaos could not leave the chaos, as they were restricted by some kind of transcendent power. Even if he transcended the chaos, he would still need to use some means to bring people away. Bringing Su Shaner along was not a problem. However, he knew that he could not bring Ding Yu and the others along. When there were too many people, it would lead to some special changes. Therefore, before leaving the chaos, it was time to get together again. After all, he would probably never return to the chaos after transcending it. As for whether or not Ding Yu and the other disciples could transcend chaos, that was unknown. Perhaps they would only be able to do so after the heavenly Tao laws unified the supreme laws of the chaos, which would take a very long time. In any case, Chuzan planned to pass on a method to transcend chaos to his disciples before he left. The creation chaos scripture was only suitable for Chuzan, and his disciples could not cultivate it. However, as someone who would soon transcend the chaos, Chuzan had already derived a cultivation technique from the creation chaos scripture that could transcend the chaos. This cultivation method could only be cultivated after one had broken through to the chaos supreme realm. Although the cultivation technique was not as good as the creation chaos scripture, the main thing was that it would allow them to transcend the chaos. The process of cultivation was naturally incomparably long. It was no longer counted in tens of thousands of years, but tens and hundreds of millions of years. Let's go back for a while, Chuzan stood up and said. He did not detach the small residence from the back of the chaotic being, leaving it behind as an opportunity for a fated person. In the future, those with great fortune could enter the small residence and gain some enlightenment. Chuzan looked over and saw the entire chaos in his field of vision. The chaos was a vast land, and at the center of the huge land of chaos, there was a small light spot. It was the divine world. Beyond the chaos was a region of empty nothingness. Looking past the edge of the chaos, Chuzan could vaguely see another chaos. The two chaoses were already very close. In another 10 million years, the outer regions of both chaoses would make contact. In a flash, Chuzan had returned to the divine world. He walked around and observed the prosperity and liveliness of the three realms. Huang Long popped his head out. Fellow Taoist Chu, you're back. I came back to take a look before I leave, Chuzan said with a smile. He was going to take the heavenly spirit cat, the sky-shaking golden rock, and the spirit-devouring flower with him. They were given to him by the system, so they were technically not living beings of the chaos. Therefore, it would be easy to bring them along. Leave, to where? Huang Long asked curiously. Beyond the chaos. Huang Long revealed a look of yearning. He was someone who was curious and loved to see new things, unlike Gui Ran, who was always sleeping. Huang Long, when the heavenly Tao has united the supreme laws of the chaos, you will be able to leave the chaos. Chuzan paused for a moment before continuing, however, outside the chaos is an empty area. If you're not strong enough, you probably won't be able to stay there for long. He chatted with Huang Long for some time, also telling him about the other chaos. Huang Long was excited. There was going to be another show to watch. When two chaoses fused, something special would definitely appear. He eventually arrived at the netherworld and the reincarnation cycle that he had created. He sighed. Ji's avatar had already transcended the world creator realm. Perhaps it would one day catch up to his main body. The speed of his improvement was not slow. Chu Zan returned to the small courtyard. The small courtyard was the same as always, unchanged. The Chu family could be considered prosperous. However, the southern region had become a special miniature world, and there were not many members of the Chu family left in the southern region. Most of them were Chu Zan's acquaintances. Chu Tianming had reached the Daoyuan realm, and now resided in the Heaven realm. The current head of the Chu family was 7th Master Chu. Chu Yun did not return to the Chu family very often, though she would occasionally walk around the Heaven realm. She continued to teach the human race's geniuses in the New World. There was a holy land in the New World called the Fairy Palace. This was where Chu Yun resided, along with Mei, Qian and Wu. Qian had sacrificed himself to deal with Mo Yao, and even though Chu Zan had made a move, there were also some side effects, which was that his growth was very slow. Of course, it might also be because of Qian himself. Perhaps he missed his carefree childhood. Even now, he looked like he was only 6 or 7 years old. He was like a child who could not grow up. However, he was not weak, and had already surpassed the 100,000-mile mark. Chu Yun herself had already surpassed the 10-million-mile mark. Chu Zan returned to the small courtyard and sat on the recliner, leisurely. In the courtyard, there were traces of his Dao aura. In fact, this place too would be an opportunity for whoever stumbled upon it. If any of the future descendants of the Chu family had the opportunity to enter this place, that person would definitely gain untold benefits. Even if that descendant's level of talent was lacking, cultivating here would turn him into a monstrous genius. After all, he had spent a century cultivating here, and he had broken through to the Chaos Supreme Realm here. If he transcended the chaos here as well, the effect would be even more exaggerated. Of course, not everyone who entered would be able to obtain good fortune. After all, destiny was a matter of fate. Chu Zan looked at the pocket dimension. The 4 divine beasts were about to break through to the Chaos Supreme. He stretched out his hand and pointed, and a trace of intent entered the pocket dimension. The 4 divine beasts roared and began to break through to the Chaos Supreme Realm. As a system reward, the 4 Spirit Stars chariot could also be brought out of the chaos without any hindrances, even if the 4 divine beasts originated from the chaos. Chu Zan was very curious to see which other beings had transcended the chaos. There should be others, right? Where did those experts go? Could it be that he was traveling around the void, or did they create their own world within the void? To Chu Zan, the situation beyond the chaos was unknown. He then recalled the time when he had experienced transcending the chaos. Back then, he had caught a glimpse of a huge head outside a certain chaos. Did that person fail to transcend the chaos, or did he succeed? After leaving the chaos, he could go and check it out. Su Shaner was happily preparing ingredients, seemingly returning to the time when she accompanied Chu Zan in the small courtyard. Although the time they spent in the small courtyard was very short in comparison to the time they had spent in the chaos, it was the most memorable. The heavenly spirit cat had returned. It circled around Chu Zan's calf and rubbed its head against it a few times. The sky-shaking golden rock was perched on the wall of the courtyard in an awe-inspiring manner, as usual. The spirit-devouring flower was like a strange little tree, taking root in a corner of the courtyard. Chu Zan was waiting for Ding Yu and the others to return. Before he left, he would once again preach the Tao to his disciples and impart techniques to them. He looked at the system. So many years passed, yet the system was still in the process of updating and restarting. Hopefully that would change after he left the chaos. He was curious as to how the system would change after this. Would there be any new functions? Was there anything after transcending the chaos? 100 years later, Chu Yun returned to the small courtyard. 13th brother. She wrapped her arms around Chu Zan's neck like a spoiled child. It had been a long time since she had seen Chu Zan. Of course, she spent most of her time in closed-door cultivation, or occasionally accompanying her grandfather and the others. Chu Tianming had become a Daoyuan realm big shot, and he was extremely smug. He often put on the attitude of a peerless master. He was not very strong. However, he had a special identity, so no one was willing to find trouble with him. Chu Yun felt that as long as her grandfather was happy, everything was fine. Over the next 100 years, the disciples returned one after another. When everyone arrived, Chu Zan started off by transmitting the cultivation method to transcend the chaos to his disciples. Among his disciples, Heiyu and Chu-yi were the most powerful, and had surpassed the 30 million mile mark. The cultivation method to transcend the chaos was imprinted in each disciple's divine soul. Only when they broke through to the Chaos Supreme Realm would they be able to unseal it. Chuzan had also taught Qin Ying, Ren Chang, Du Yuan, and his other followers, in name disciples, and people who could be considered his disciples. Whether or not they could reach that final step would depend on their own good fortune and efforts. I'm about to leave the chaos, Chuzan said. Before I leave, I'll leave some things behind. Tens of millions of years from now, this chaos will collide with another chaos. It will be a calamity, but as usual, there will also be opportunities within it. After the chaoses fuse, it will advance. When the heavenly Tao laws completely unify the supreme laws of the chaos, there will also be some changes. After breaking through to the Chaos Supreme Realm, you should be able to leave the chaos for a short time. Ding Yu and the others listened in silence. After this farewell, they really did not know when he would be able to see their master again. In fact, they might not even have the chance to meet. Their master was about to leave the chaos. Furthermore, there was more than one chaos. This was truly a great revelation. After Chuzan finished giving his instructions, he gave each of them a ball of chaotic energy of creation, which fused with their bodies. After Ding Yu and the others left, Chuzan looked at Chu Yun. Do you want to leave with me? It should not be a problem to take two people with him. Chu Yun hesitated. 13th brother, I can't bear to leave grandfather and the others, she sighed. Chuzan nodded. This was within his expectations. He naturally understood his cousin. Chu Tianming doted on her a lot, and Chu Yun was not an unfilial person. I might never be able to transcend the chaos, Chu Yun said sadly. She knew that her level of talent was still a little inferior to Chuzan's personal disciples. Chuzan waved his hand, and a ball of chaotic energy of creation entered her body. That day will eventually come, he said with a smile. Furthermore, when the heavenly Tao laws unify the supreme laws of the chaos, you too will also be able to leave the chaos. I'll definitely work hard in my cultivation. Chu Yun nodded her head firmly. Chuzan looked at the origin Tao ring. He did not know if the great Tao cultivation group would still be usable after he left the chaos. It was unlikely. He thought for a moment, waved his hand, and created a group within the heavenly Tao. Ding Yu and the others were pulled in. This way, even without the origin Tao ring, they could still communicate with each other through the heavenly Tao group, and even transmit items. Chuzan also gave Heiyu the ability to create new groups. She also wielded a large amount of authority within the heavenly Tao due to her key role in completing the heavenly Tao talisman plan, and the fact that she cultivated the heavenly Tao scripture. After finishing all this, Chuzan's figure flickered and disappeared. He appeared in front of Kingslayer and looked at him. This fellow was also extraordinary. Chuzan officially accepted him as an in-name disciple. Given Kingslayer's talent and persistence, he was stronger than Qin Ying and Ren Chang. He was more than qualified to be an in-name disciple. Kingslayer was extremely excited by this. Feng Kong was already Chuzan's follower, and Chuzan decided to also treat him like an in-name disciple. He did not know what these two were thinking, as they had actually joined forces to adventure and explore the chaos. He had similarly transmitted his cultivation techniques to them. Finally, Chuzan arrived at the Supreme Primal Chaos space. First, he met the giant Chaos God and the other three, as well as the one Chaos Supreme Realm expert that he had rescued. He preached the Tao to the five of them to increase their strength, and also informed them about the matter of the two chaoses so that they could make preparations in advance. Finally, he gathered the other Chaos Supreme Realm experts together and informed them of this matter as well so that they could seize the opportunity. A calamity was also an opportunity. However, he did not mention that he would be leaving the chaos. In the end, Chuzan summoned Qin and Fengying, and gave them some methods to deal with possible crises during critical moments. Naturally, he had left behind more than this. The heavenly Tao itself had trump cards that he had prepared. Huang Long and the other two creatures of the heavenly Tao were one of those trump cards. Ding Yu and the other disciples all had something prepared for them, but they were unaware of this. After he was done with all of this, he took another 10,000 years to travel through the chaos. Chuzan then arrived at the edge of the chaos. He moved Su Shaner into the pocket dimension, along with the heavenly spirit cat, the sky-shaking golden rock, and the spirit-devouring flower. Step by step, he walked out of the chaos. The edge of the chaos churned, and thunder and lightning erupted. It was as if there was a transcendent barrier and power that was blocking him. Chuzan took a step forward and his figure seemed to turn illusory. He was not in the chaos, but outside it. Outside the chaos, there was nothing. There was no spiritual power, no laws, and no great Tao. There seemed to be nothing. It was an indescribable emptiness. Only the chaos continued to expand within this void. The void region was truly boundless. No one knew if there was an end to it. At the edge of the chaos, a huge head was floating quietly. The head existed in a void region, constantly moving outward as the chaos expanded. It was not devoured by chaos. Occasionally, some of the chaos, spiritual energy and laws would be absorbed into the head. Time did not seem to exist in the void region. There was nothing. However, the void region still existed in an inexplicable way. From the looks of it, it did not seem like there was nothing at all. Even Chaos Supreme Realm experts could not stay for long here. After a long time, their cultivation would dissipate into nothingness. Only those who had transcended the chaos could walk safely in the void region without suffering side effects. Transcending the chaos was like he had transcended some sort of barrier. His very being had undergone a special transformation. At a certain moment, the eyes on the head opened. They were filled with confusion. His thoughts began to condense, and his originally dim eyes finally glowed with light. His memories seemed to have returned, and his eyes revealed a contemplative look. How many years had passed? There was no passage of time in the void region, and it could also turn everything into nothingness. The head could only rely on devouring the spiritual energy of the chaos and the laws of the chaos to maintain himself. Even so, he was unable to recover. He could sense that there was something unusual in the chaos. It seemed that a living being was about to leave the chaos. The battle back then had resulted in the chaos crumbling and turning into many small chaoses of various sizes. Though some of the smaller chaoses had fused, and the chaos was recovering, how could a living being that transcended the chaos appear at this time? His eyes were filled with doubt. Although that chaos was not small, it was not large either. It should not have been possible for a living being of this level to appear. Moreover, the time was too short. How many years had it been since the chaos collapsed? Although he could not clearly sense it, he was sure that it was not enough time for an existence of this level to appear. What had happened? Chuzan took a step forward, and thunder and lightning surrounded him. With this step, he transcended the chaos. At this moment, he passed through the edge of the expanding chaos and past the invisible barrier, arriving at the void region. There was no spiritual energy, no laws, and he could not sense the existence of time. It was as if nothing existed. Chuzan walked forward step by step, and then looked back. The chaos below him was still expanding. He was above the chaos, looking down at it. He recalled the scene he saw when he transcended the chaos. Chuzan continued forward, looking around. He saw 8 chaoses, rolling and expanding. One of them was very close to the chaos he had been in. The turbulent boundaries of the chaoses had already begun to make contact. They were almost the same size. In another 10 million years or so, the 2 chaoses would make full contact. The other 6 chaoses were of different sizes. The bigger ones were much bigger than the chaos he had been in. The smaller ones were nearly a third smaller. The 8 chaoses continued to expand, and a collision between all of them was inevitable, and in the end, only one chaos would remain. Chuzan was very interested in this void area. He wanted to see if there was a boundary. However, it was empty, and he did not know where the start or end was. He then turned to look for the huge head he had seen back then. Suddenly, he received a thought transmission. How did you transcend the chaos? The voice was filled with shock. Chuzan's eyes swept around and saw a head at the edge of a chaos. Compared to that chaos, this head was naturally very small. However, compared to normal living beings, it was extremely huge. Even the giant chaotic being from back then would appear tiny in comparison to this head. Chuzan took a step forward and arrived in front of the head. His body expanded, and he grew to a size that was slightly bigger than this head. Chuzan examined the head. A human, he could sense the origins of the human race from his head. It was a human expert. That being said, its current form seemed to be due to some sort of technique. His body had already disappeared, and only the head remained. It could be felt that the owner of the head had suffered heavy injuries. Even so, Chuzan could feel that the head's aura was not much weaker than his. He was definitely someone who had transcended the chaos. If the owner of this head had not been severely injured, he would definitely be stronger than he was now. Chuzan's heart trembled. As expected, transcending the chaos was not the end. Since the other party was stronger than him, why was he so severely injured? Who are you? Why are you so heavily injured? The head's eyes widened and it turned its head to look up at Chuzan. Quote. Can you shrink a little? The head was a little confused. This young man, did he have some kind of inferiority complex? Float up. Chuzan had no intention of shrinking his body. Looking down at the strong, how cool was that feeling? The head was exasperated. After a long while, he sighed. In the past, these young people who did not know proper etiquette would have been beaten half to death by him. However, now forget it. Why were you able to leave the chaos? The head asked in confusion. I've already transcended the chaos. Why can't I leave it? Chuzan was even more confused. Why was he being asked this question? If he could leave the chaos, did it not already imply that he had transcended the chaos? How long have you been cultivating? The head asked after a moment of silence. Over 10 million years. Chuzan sighed. Cultivation was too difficult. It took him more than 10 million years to transcend the chaos. In comparison, it took him less than 100 years to break through to the Chaos Supreme Realm. Chuzan felt emotional whenever he thought about this. As expected, if he did not have the cheat-like system, no matter how monstrous his talent was, it would still take a long time to become strong. Had the system not been updating, perhaps he would have been able to transcend the chaos by remaining in seclusion for 10,000 years. The head's eyes widened. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Moreover, a wave of his aura swept out uncontrollably, and then the aura was thrown into disarray. His breathing was like thunder. What did you just say? You transcended the Tao realm after cultivating for 10 million years. Chuzan stared at the head and fell into a state of deep thought. He noticed that the head was not talking about transcending the chaos, but the Tao realm instead. As 10 million years a short time? You know, I broke through to the Chaos Supreme Realm in less than 100 years. In the end, it took me more than 10 million years to transcend the chaos, Chuzan said without changing his expression. The head could no longer remain calm. His breathing became heavier. The eyes were wide open. What do you mean by transcending the Tao realm? Chuzan asked as he looked around him. In the void region, other than the chaoses, there was nothing. He remembered that when he transcended the chaos, he had once caught a glimpse of a corner of something that was a little special. Do you know where you are? The head asked in a hoarse voice after he finally calmed down. I'd like to hear the details, Chuzan replied. The head turned around and looked at chaoses. The chaos of the past was not like this. Chuzan raised an eyebrow and looked at the chaoses, deep in thought. He was a little shocked. He suddenly realized that the chaoses seemed to have been shattered before. What kind of terrifying existence was able to shatter the chaos to such an extent? You should be able to tell that the current chaoses were actually shattered previously, the head said. Tell me, what happened? Chuzan was very interested. What kind of great battle had shattered the chaos? The chaoses that he saw now were constantly expanding and would eventually fuse with each other. However, in reality, it was simply in the process of self-recovery. Chuzan thought again. If the chaos was restored, and the heavenly Tao took control of it, how powerful would it be? What realm was above his current realm? It was a long time ago. The head recalled the past. The chaoses you see now are only a part of it. After a long time, it has recovered by quite a bit. Back then, this place was tens of times larger than it is today. After crossing this place, you'll reach the real chaotic region. This isn't even half of the chaos, the head explained. Chuzan was shocked. What he saw in front of him was not the entire chaos. There was an even greater chaos. What kind of war could break such a vast thing apart? Could it be that the entire void region was originally the chaos? The head seemed to know what he was thinking. The void region has always existed. Chaos exists within the void. No one knows how the void exists. And no one knows if there is an end to the void region. The head turned to look at Chuzan again. Your current cultivation realm is actually known as the Transcendent Tao realm. Do you know what realms are above it? This was also what Chuzan wanted to know. He shook his head. I only know that I haven't reached the end yet. I don't know if there are any realms above this. After hearing that, the head paused for a moment, and then gave him an introduction. Actually, there isn't much of a difference in general. It's just that the name of the realms are a little different, the head said. The mortal realm is actually the body refining realm. The realms are then the same until the Daoyuan realm. Below the 100,000 mile mark is known as the Saint Tao realm. The 9th level of the Saint Tao realm corresponds to the 9 extreme Daoyuan realma. In the early days of the 9 zones, the experts of the immortal, celestial, demon, and other races were also called saints, which was likely derived from this cultivation system that the head was talking about. Thanks to this introduction, Chuzan understood the division of the cultivation realms. Once a cultivator reached the 100,000-mile mark, he or she would be known as a Saint Dao King, which had 9 levels that corresponded to the 9 extreme Daoyuan realm levels up to the 999,999-mile mark. After that, one would be called a Saint Dao Emperor once they reached the World Creator realm. The Saint Dao Hallowed realm corresponded to those who had transcended the World Creator realm, while the Chaos Supreme realm was known as the Holy Dao realm. Transcending the Chaos realm was known as transcending the Dao realm. At this point, the head did not continue. Instead, he asked, "Do you think that I'm someone who existed from before the chaos was shattered?" "Aren't you?" Chuzan was startled. This person had suffered such heavy injuries and was so familiar with the history of the chaos. He should have personally experienced the great battle back then. He should be a survivor of that great battle. The head smiled. The chaos is a forbidden land. Outside the chaos, there is another world. I'm from that world. The existence of the chaos is a bit special. It involves a deeper level of profound mysteries that I don't understand. However, I can tell you that chaos is dangerous for that world. It is a forbidden land, but at the same time, it is also a land of opportunities. That being said, only transcendent Dao realm cultivators can leave the chaos alive. Chuzan sighed when he heard this. It turned out that he had been living in a forbidden zone, and not what others regarded as the world. That world is called the Heavenly Sun world. In the Heavenly Sun world, the human race is one of the most powerful races, with countless experts, the head continued. The chaos is considered a forbidden zone because of the experts it produces. Every single person who walks out of it is a transcendent Dao realm expert. As such, all of the experts from the chaos that we have met are transcendent Dao realm experts, which resulted in the terror that the inhabitants of the Heavenly Sun world feel toward the chaos. Chuzan listened quietly. The reason for this impression was that those below the Dao realm could not leave the chaos. I don't know how many years have passed, but back then, an extremely important figure from the Heavenly Sun world met someone in the chaos. She fell in love with that person and followed him into the chaos. Chuzan continued to listen in silence. This should be the cause of the great battle. He could not help but curse in his heart. Another battle triggered by love. Was this a drama? That important person was already engaged. When Chuzan heard this, he thought to himself that it was indeed very much like a drama. That person's fiancé copyright was infuriated and challenged the person from the chaos to a battle, with the loser backing off from pursuing that important person. This was originally an agreement between just the two of them. After all, they were good friends. However, it seemed that someone was fanning the flames from behind the scene, and said that the person from the chaos was colluding with other forces from the chaos to conquer and unify the Heavenly Sun world. I don't know the details. I only know that the woman seemed to have been severely injured and almost died because of this. Her father was furious and started a great war against the chaos. The one from the chaos was also furious, and attacked in order to avenge the woman. The head smiled bitterly. On the surface, it was due to love, but whoever was planning it all probably wanted to suppress the chaos. That woman's father, along with the other experts of the Heavenly Sun world, tried to kill the man. It's said that the woman risked her life to save him. The two of them eventually turned into remnant souls and no one knows where they went. The head heaved a long sigh. However, who would have thought that the man, who was already terrifyingly strong, was not the most powerful being in the chaos? On top of that, that man was the disciple of the Master of the Chaos. This matter has incurred the wrath of the Master of the Chaos, and he took action immediately. The head seemed to be recalling that scene, and his eyes revealed a look of fear. The high and mighty Dao creation and Dao supreme experts from the Heavenly Sun world could not stand against him. The head seemed to be recalling that scene, and his eyes revealed a look of fear. The high and mighty Dao creation and Dao supreme experts from the Heavenly Sun world could, because of that scheme, the Heavenly Sun world was in danger of being destroyed. Chuzan's heart trembled. Master of the Chaos, Dao creation experts and Dao supreme experts were above those who had transcended the Dao realm. Even such powerful experts were unable to stand before the Master of the Chaos. He was still too weak. Chuzan reminded himself that he was no longer invincible after leaving the chaos. He could not be too brash and ostentatious. Moreover, it seemed that the chaos and the Heavenly Sun world were at odds with each other. The Master of the Chaos was so powerful, yet the chaos was still shattered. It was clear that an expert on the same level as the Master of the Chaos had appeared. Perhaps that expert was even stronger than the Master of the Chaos. The head's emotions fluctuated greatly as it recalled the battle back then. When the Heavenly Sun world faced this great crisis, in the end, a legendary existence made his move and fought against the Master of the Chaos. He's a legendary expert of our human race. The head sighed. The Master of the Chaos was stopped, and the experts of the Heavenly Sun world then launched an attack to conquer the chaos. However, there were countless experts within the chaos. In this battle, the chaos was shattered, but the Heavenly Sun world suffered heavy losses. Countless experts fell during this battle. Back then, this void region was filled with the corpses of experts from both sides. But now, all of these corpses have disappeared. That battle had been too brutal. Even if Chu Zan had not experienced it himself, he could imagine how terrifying that battle was. The chaos lost? Chu Zan asked curiously. I don't know, he shook his head. I was severely injured and almost died. I don't know what the final result of the battle was. The Master of the Chaos and the ruler of the Heavenly Sun world seemed to have disappeared, he said after a moment of silence. All of the powerful beings who participated in the battle also disappeared. Even the corpses in the void region have disappeared. It's as if everything has been turned into nothingness. Chu Zan felt that the battle back then was a conspiracy. He wondered if the mastermind was still alive. How's the Heavenly Sun world? Chu Zan asked. I don't know, he shook his head. Before the battle, the Heavenly Sun world's cultivators occasionally came to the chaos. However, after the war, I have never seen one again. You are the first person I've seen since then. The head looked at Chu Zan, still in disbelief. Why would such a person walk out of the chaos? Have you really only cultivated for 10 million years? Quote. Of course, I'm an honest man, I never lie, Chu Zan said seriously. What was your cultivation level back then? Chu Zan asked curiously. The head's current strength was weaker than his due to the injuries the former had suffered. However, he could also tell that the head was still a transcendent Dao realm expert. He was probably far stronger before this. I had just reached the Dao creation realm. The head sighed. From the Heavenly Sun world, all of the experts who had reached the Dao creation realm and above were sent out, and even 90% of those who had reached the transcendent Dao realm were sent out. Almost all of them died. That battle was definitely the most tragic battle in the history of the Heavenly Sun world. Is it the Dao creation realm above the transcendent Dao realm? What does Dao creation mean? What about the realms above the Dao creation realm? Chu Zan asked curiously. The head looked at him and muttered, when one creates their Dao path, it is based on the great Dao, and not created out of thin air, and as one progresses down that Dao path, it involves one's comprehension of the great Dao. I don't know much about the chaos, but I assume that holy Dao realm cultivators there have mastered at least one supreme law, if not more. The supreme laws are a type of great Dao as well, so technically, it is still within the Dao realm. Chu Zan nodded. Chaos Supreme Realm experts did possess supreme power and had control over a part of the supreme laws of the chaos. As such, the head's explanation made sense. Transcending the Dao realm means that you've transcended the realm where your Dao path relies on the great Dao, which is the realm you've reached right now, the head continued. Chu Zan nodded. Above the transcendent Dao realm is the Dao creation realm. As for what Dao creation is, when you understand the difference between creating a Dao path and creating a great Dao, you might be able to create a Dao. Of course, not everyone can create their own Dao. Chu Zan muttered to himself, Dao creation realm. He looked at the 3,000 masses of chaotic energy of creation in his body. Could the supreme laws generated and contained within them be considered Dao creation? That being said, it was only in its embryonic stage, and incomplete. The Dao path that connected the 3,000 masses of chaotic energy of creation. Was that also considered Dao creation? That too was incomplete. It seemed that it was not easy to create a Dao. Could the heavenly Dao be considered a Dao creation? Chu Zan fell into a state of deep thought. He was the one who had created the heavenly Dao, but he had used the great Dao of the 9 zones as a reference, and it had grown by devouring the great Dao of the 9 zones, and was now targeting the supreme laws of the chaos. Perhaps it could not be considered a true Dao creation, but it could not be considered a Dao path either. Would it be considered a Dao creation after it unified the supreme laws of the chaos? Chu Zan then thought of the origin great Dao. This might be considered a true Dao creation. Initially, it was an origin Dao crystal, but then it grew to become an origin Dao ring, and contained its own great Dao. Although it imitated the heavenly Dao laws and the laws of the great Dao of the 9 zones, it was still independent after all. It had evolved from a crystal to the point when it formed its own great Tao. However, the origin great Tao was still weak and would probably not be enough to help him break through to the Tao creation realm.